take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla, every Saturday night on the LNM Network from 9 p.m. to midnight. And now your host, Riscalla.
Hello and welcome everyone. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. I am your host, Riscalla, and we are here every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to midnight on the LNM Network. Thank you for joining in. Greatly appreciate it. Got a couple of things to talk about. Let's see. Let's start with... Let me start with the great phone call that occurred this last week, or that was brought up this last week, I should say. A phone call that was supposedly enough to impeach a president, believe it or not. Anyway, a phone call that was supposed to be so bad that they were going to impeach a president. Now, of all the things that we could find, is it going to be a phone call now that's going to do the job? A phone call to another leader. He's not allowed to discuss business, because if he does, then he has broken the law in some way, shape, or form. And before you know it, here we are at the wonderful people in Congress sitting around trying to figure out how they're going to boot him out of office again. The Comey report didn't work. The Mueller report didn't work. The obstruction didn't work. The collusion didn't work. Everything they throw at him doesn't work. They're in a massive panic because if they can't remove this president from his office, they are all going down. This is what's happening. This is what we're up against. And in all of this going back and forth, my fear is, as they become more and more brazen in pushing for different legislation that steals our rights, they're going to push us into a war. So I can't help but wonder if that's really what they want after all this is said and done. They continue to push and push and push, and the silent majority is not remaining so silent anymore. More and more people are speaking out. More and more people are coming forward. They're tired of a small group of people speaking for the entire country when the majority of the entire country doesn't feel the same as they do. Then they're called names, they're attacked violently, and those who are in power approach them in a manner that would cause them all kinds of stress by finding legal ways to tie them up and underscore all of their finances. Look at what they did to the general. They wore out this poor man. He had to literally borrow money for years. What, 2 years they went after this guy? You think it's cheap to have one of these attorneys that's they run anywhere from 300 on up? Some of them are excess of $1,000 an hour. To have them there for 20 hours at a time? It doesn't take long. 20 hours. Doesn't take long. And you're in debt up into above your head. And where do you go? The article I read said he had to second mortgage his house to pay for his attorneys, when all of the charges against him are now proven to be false. They're all made up. But it didn't change the fact that they drug him through court. It didn't change the fact that he had tens of thousands of dollars in bills, because these people have declared war on us, the silent majority. And really, when it's all said and done, it's our fault because we've been silent. And people now are beginning to speak up. And people are beginning to stand out because they're relatively tired of what's going on here. Every time it seems as though one of these people are given an opportunity, they're spoken in a manner that is detrimental to the American life. It takes away from our ability to express ourselves. How many conservatives have been shut down on either Facebook or YouTube or one of the other social platforms? Why? Because they may say something that is, they quote as hate speech. What happened to freedom of speech? And why isn't it hate speech when the Democrats are saying things like, you have to find the people who support the Trump supporters and you have to drive them out. You have to tell them they're not welcome. What is that? Is that not hate speech? But that's condoned. But when someone posts, as a matter of fact, the Declaration of Independence of the United States on Facebook, it gets pulled down because it's hate speech. And these are the silly, insane things that we're facing. Our freedoms are slowly being usurped by this small group of people who want to turn our country from a constitutional republic into a socialistic state, where everybody is the same, everybody gets paid the same. Of course the government is going to take care of you. Sure they are. Well, the latest call, since they want to continue down this impeachment avenue, the latest call, I will tell you, there will be no impeachment, in my opinion. And the reason there's not going to be an impeachment is there's part of this, if he is brought up on charges, part of the process that is called discovery comes into play. When discovery comes into play, all of these people that are bringing charges against him have to answer under oath questions that will be given to them from his side. Do you think they want to do that? Do you think they want to sit there under oath and answer questions that might incriminate themselves and constantly take the fifth and make themselves look foolish? That's why I'm telling you, I don't think impeachment is in the picture. I think that what is going to be in the picture is every attempt that they can to ruin him in the public opinion's court, and it's not going to work. Every time that they attempt to do something to bring harm to this president, and whether it's political or financial or whatever that might be, it comes back to bite them in the proverbial behind, and he comes up stronger than before. They have yet to learn that this man knows 3D chess like the back of his hand. And as a result of that, they fall in. I can't help but think that he sets up traps. They fall into these traps of his, and they look like the fools that they are. There is really hard for them to step aside after, here's the thing. They brought up all of these bad things that he said to this president, the Ukraine president, and I can't think of his name right off the bat. He forced this president to do this, that, and the other, right? This is what they're claiming. But when they look into it, here we have Joe Biden literally bragging openly how he had forced a prosecutor that was that was looking out for corruption where his son was involved had forced that prosecutor to be fired. But if Trump asks the new president, who won supposedly by basically the same thing that Trump has said, he's going to drain his swamp over there. He wants to bring honesty and transparency back. So if you ask this president who ran on that to listen, if you're going to be honest and transparent, can you take a look? I've just heard some things that really didn't sound good to me. Can you take a look at that? And I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. He didn't say, I'm going to hold money back from you like Biden did. He didn't say threaten him in any way, shape, or form. He didn't pressure him in any way, shape, or form. He just asked him to take a look at it and assign a prosecutor and have his people talk to their people, basically. But somehow that phone call has created such havoc among the other side that they want to remove him. Now, what does it mean when a president, and you know, he's done some things I don't agree with. I got to tell you, I'm not in 100% agreement with this man. I don't think that anybody is. But he has done some things that are concerning me lately. One of them is this push for vaccines, more vaccines. Another one is the red flag laws. These are absolutely unconstitutional. You can't force, the government does not have the authority to force you to do anything. Just why Obamacare was unconstitutional. And yet it passed because the corruption is so far and wide, and people have really lost the sense of understanding of what the government is supposed to do. The basic purpose of our government is to defend our Constitution. That's their basic purpose. And instead, they've attacked it right and left. They've taken pieces from here and pieces from there. And what we're left with today is big chunks missing out of that. As a result of that, our freedoms, your personal freedoms, mine and yours, have been taken from us under deception and continue to be attacked and to be taken from us under deception without authority. These people do not have the authority to do this. They only have the guns to do it. And that is why they want gun control. They're fearful if we get together, if we unite, and we decide that we've had enough of their nonsense, they are fearful that we would literally take them over. And I'm fearful this is what they're pushing us into. With all of the nonsense and the insanity that they're bringing down upon our heads, I'm afraid that this is what they're pushing us into. What is going to happen in the next election, whether Trump wins or whether Trump loses? What do you think is going to happen? Have you ever taken the time to consider if he wins, they're going to go absolutely you know what? If he loses, we're going to have patriots out in the street because we know that he will have lost by them cheating and stealing it back from him. So what do you think is going to happen in this next election? I have told many people that this next election is literally the turning point for our country. Literally, the turning point for our country, because people are going to make a decision this next election. Either we're going to show up literally by the hordes, by hundreds of thousands of people. We're going to show up and we're going to place our vote in what we believe in a man who has basically helped bring this country back. Even though I don't agree with everything, overall speaking, he's done a job better than any other president that I know of. Far outdone everybody. Again, he has things I don't agree with, but overall speaking, he's done an outstanding job. So if you're not going to vote for him, who are you going to vote for? You're going to vote for people who support, who celebrate the ability to kill a child even after it comes out of the birth canal. If the mother decides that she does not want that child, they celebrate this. Is this who you want to vote for? They celebrate the idea of leaving our borders open so that we can have more people coming into this country who don't belong here. I'm not talking about people seeking asylum. Those are true families who genuinely need a chance to be here. But that's not what's coming over here, generally speaking. What we're seeing is an influx, a Trojan horse, if you will, of young men coming in by the hundreds of thousands. Over 1 million they're expecting over the next year. Another 1 million people running around in our country who don't belong here. How many innocent people have been killed as a result of one of these people being here? And somehow we are racist or xenophobist or Islamophobist or some kind of phobist because we don't want them here. We prefer that they would do the right thing and not break our laws, because when we break the laws, we're held responsible. But somehow when they break the law and come into this country, we reward them. Could you blame them for coming here? Some of those people get more money than retired people who have paid into the system for God knows how many decades. They come over here in a span of months. They're making sometimes 2, 3, upwards of that per month than someone who has paid in the system. These upside down decisions that have been made by this government, who is nothing but corrupt, really. It's just so much corruption. I have never seen or witnessed so much corruption exposed in our country before. And I don't think any of it would be this way had Trump lost. I think that all of this would have continued and gotten much worse than it is today. Even with everything that has been exposed, we are still at the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more going on that needs to be addressed. But the problem is we have people who have nothing on their agenda but to remove this president. Nothing has happened. Do you realize nothing has happened in Congress? Nothing has happened in Congress other than impeach the president. Now, how long have they been in office? I think it's over 100 days. Let me give you a job, and you work at that job for 100 days, and you do nothing. How long do you think your boss is going to keep you on the payroll? Because, unfortunately, they don't get fired because people are asleep at the wheel. They don't realize what is going on, that these people have other business that needs to be handled, but all they are doing is worrying about getting this president, some way, shape, or form, out of office. In the meantime, we suffer. The American people suffer. The country suffers. It suffers in a wide variety of ways. Look at other countries looking at us and us appearing to be absolutely foolish in the way things are being done here. We look like an unorganized, easy prey for someone who doesn't like us right now. We have literally 50% of our government fighting 50% of the government. How ridiculous is that? What happened to working for the American people? What happened to representing us? And the majority of us have sounded off very clearly when we elected this president. We wanted what he wanted. And as a result of that, people on the other side, unhappy with that decision, even though they are a smaller number, have decided to raise all hell and just make it miserable for everybody else. That's not how our country is supposed to work. That's not how the rest of us felt who didn't like the last president, who knew the last president for what he was. He is a traitor. He is a deceiver. He has lied openly and repeatedly. And I hope in one day that it will all come to light and it will all be proven without question and he will be held responsible. But even with that, you didn't see the responses from people who felt as I felt, like you're seeing today about the responses for Trump supporters. Why? Why is that? Why is it so violent? And they claim that he has brought out the violence when it is them who become violent the majority of the time. It is them who are either verbally violent or physically violent against a Trump supporter, from slapping someone in the head who is wearing a mega hat to literally throwing a liquid on a young lady walking down the street who wasn't wearing anything, just happened to be a Trump supporter, and they figured that out and they decided to drench her, to having eggs thrown on you, to being beaten literally with a chain and a lock on the end of the chain, and having to go to the hospital and have your head sewed back together. All of these things combined, none of this happened with the last president and the people who didn't agree with the last president, yet it's happening today. Why? You have to ask yourself these questions. Why? Why are we ramping up? Why are things becoming more and more violent in certain areas of our country? So possibly, these are all undermined by people who do not want us to continue in the path that we have for the last 3 years. They don't like what has happened. They don't like the idea that we have pulled ourselves out of deals with other countries that have cost us tremendously over the years. They don't like the idea that the unemployment rate is at the lowest it's ever been. They don't like the idea that this president has unified the majority of our country, and the more that they throw eggs at him, the more it ends up on their face. They can't figure out what to do in order to make him to look bad in the public's eye. And every time they turn around, I laugh. And I laugh because they don't know every time that they attempt to do something, he's like almost like a boomerang in a way, right? It's like a trampoline, like a political trampoline. Whatever they throw at him bounces off of him and hits him right back in the proverbial behind and bites him hard. And there's nothing better that I can think of. All right, tonight I'm going to have, we'll have David on tonight. We'll have Milo on tonight. We'll have John on tonight. We're going to be talking about some very important things, and that is the return of America the way that it's supposed to be. The return of America and us being, and I know a lot of people get kind of queasy when this term comes up, but truly, we are sovereign citizens. We're supposed to be citizens of our states, and we're not. That citizenry has been stolen from us and given to the federal government, and as a result of that, we're under, supposedly, the authority of the Congress. And we're going to go into that in a little while and give you some information on what we can do in order to be able to get around some of this stuff legally, to have a legal stand on how to be able to get to get around these things that they've done to us. Anyway, let's take a break, and I'll be back shortly. Don't go away.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
Grace has some pretty stellar arms, like Serena Williams good, but her face is pretty disgusting.
Someone please tell him to go back into his closet and leave us alone.
Brittany's face is so stupid and I hate her so much. It's like a scientist created her in a lab to annoy humanity and didn't even do that good of a job.
Megan reminds me of a troll doll that came to life intent on killing us with her stupidity.
Why is Grace's head so big? It definitely has nothing to do with how smart she is and probably everything to do with how bloated she is.
He's so funny. Just kidding. Who would find this disfigured flamingo funny?
Never post a selfie of yourself. You look so ugly.
The only reason you have so many views is because we think you're a freak and we can't look away.
Megan is the main reason that the world sucks so much.
I would rather get cancer than listen to another Trevor Moran song.
You are a mistake. You should have never been born.
Drown yourself in a shallow puddle, please.
Wow, I hope she's sterile.
These really stopped being funny a long time ago.
You're so much more than the things that people say about you.
Those people have no right to say cruel things to you to make themselves feel better.
It's okay that you sound different than everyone else.
That's what makes you so special.
We will not tolerate it. We will not tolerate it.
We will not tolerate it.
We will not tolerate it.
Every day, people make me feel like I stand out simply because of the way that I look.
Every day, people make me feel small.
Every day, I face the cruel words of bullying.
And every day, people tell me that I'm brave for enduring this humiliation.
But we're not the brave ones.
It's the ones that say no to the bullying.
The witnesses.
If we all join together, there's nothing that we can't do. We will no longer be the silent majority.
When we see bullying online,
we will let the world know that we're going to take action with the I.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
Our actions will overpower cruel words.
I am a witness.
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 There is power in words.
But it's nothing compared to the power of the actions that we put behind our words.
Visit eyewitnessbullying.org to learn more.
I am a witness, and so are you.
I'm gonna stand by you.
There are facts we're not being told on TV, so I want to talk to you about gun control in America. Why did all of the big media focus their attention on the attacks in Orlando and completely ignore the fact that the following weekend 52 people were shot in Chicago? a city with some of the strictest gun control laws in the country. There seems to be an agenda for gun control while ignoring the gun violence in other cities and countries where the experiment of gun control is already underway and failing. I carry a gun because there are only two types of creatures on this planet, predators and prey. No one watches a cheetah chase down a gazelle and deny that the gazelle has the right to use its horns to protect itself. But there are people who would deny that same right of self-defense to other human beings. Such people seem to think that the way to stop the cheetah is to cut the horns off the gazelle. That somehow, if you make it easier for the predator will simply go away. It doesn't work that way. If you make it easier for the predator, you get more predators. I carry a gun because when predators know they're less likely to have an advantage, they're less likely to be a predator. The FBI found that when states allow concealed carry, murder rates are immediately reduced. And cities in America that pass a law requiring households to have a firearm see the number of home invasions drop dramatically. I carry a gun because the ratio a gun is used in a homicide is significantly less than when it's used in self-defense. Firearms are used up to 300 times more often to save innocent lives than to commit a murder, and guns prevent up to 2.5 million crimes in the U.S. every year, often without a single shot ever being fired. I carry a gun not because it's a weapon, but because it's a shield. 200,000 women every year use a gun to defend themselves against sexual abuse. I carry a gun because almost every mass shooting in the last 50 years took place in a gun-free zone. Law-abiding citizens are forced to give up their right to protect themselves, while every criminal breaks the law, including gun-free signs, when they decide to murder. I carry a gun because a gun-free zone makes it easier for predators to target their prey. Stricter gun laws make the problem worse, and making guns illegal wouldn't remove murder from our cities any more than making heroin illegal stop addicts from doing drugs. I carry a gun because the facts are nations with strict gun control laws have significantly higher murder rates than those that don't. I carry a gun because I know in the U.S. scissors and knives kill almost 5 times more people every year than rifles do, including the AR-15 and other so-called assault rifles. Calling to ban a tool will not resolve the problem. I carry a gun because criminals break the law with or without them. The 9/11 terrorists used box cutters in airplanes. Timothy McVeigh used bags of assault fertilizer. I understand that some people want to blame things like semi-automatic rifles, 30-round magazines, hate crimes, terror threats, gun control, historic flags, national security, religion, or illegal immigration. I understand we want to blame something, anything that we can control. But don't blame me because I carry a concealed gun to protect my family. I understand we need to start addressing what we really want to ban: violence, murder, and insanity. I carry a gun because I know who's pushing to ban them. Our right to bear arms is not there simply to protect us against lowly criminals. I know the politicians know this, which is why they call for gun control instead of crime control. I carry a gun because I've seen gamblers who want more winnings, alcoholics who want more alcohol, and people with power want more power. I understand what the Founding Fathers knew, that the right to bear arms is there to protect the American people from those drunk with power, and I understand every country was free before it wasn't. I carry a gun because having the right to bear arms gives the citizens of this great nation a fighting chance against the predators of greed and power, whether in our home, our capital, or our neighboring lands. Evil exists only because too many good people stand by and do nothing. I know seeing America's right to free speech was a chilling wake-up call when it became locked away in a zone. That's why so many steadfast Americans and great organizations stand up for the people to keep the balance of power from tipping over. I carry a gun because it removes the unfair advantage between predators and prey. I don't carry because I'm looking for a fight. I carry a gun because I'm looking to be left alone. People can only persuade you to do something by one of two ways: reason or force. Having a gun with me removes their option to make me do something by force. It helps keep predators civilized. That's why the right to bear arms is important. That's why I own a firearm, and that's why I'm proud to say I carry a gun.
You're listening to the Fish Florida Show with your host, Riscalla. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla, every Saturday night on the LNM Network from 9 p.m. to midnight. And now your host, Riscalla.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill.
I am your host, Riscalla. A little bit of technical difficulty here with my microphone. All right, it is the Red Pill Reality Show. Thank you for taking time to tune in. And we're going to be speaking about some very important things tonight. And that is a basis on how to be able to return our country the way it's supposed to be. Because it hasn't been that way in a long time. And I'm going to have some people on who have some very interesting information, giving us a foundation, a legal foundation. I've said many times, if we're going to win this war, we have to use the same rules that are already in place in order to be able to do that. They're already there. And a lot of people don't know them, don't know about them, don't know how to use them, and as a result, we find ourselves where we are today, where we have representatives, quote representatives, who are actually not representatives at all. They're just agents of domestic agents of our enemies. All right, so let me bring on David first. David Callihan. Thank you, Dave, for calling in. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to share with us tonight.
Riscalla, hi. It's good to talk with you from the Lone Star State of Texas, where John is sitting next to me, and we're tuned in. I hope you can hear us okay.
I hear you excellent. And John, how are you doing, my friend?
Oh, doing great, Riscalla. I appreciate you, everything you're doing, and how you're presenting this, man. This is, thank you very much.
Well, you know what? Whatever benefits everybody is the kind of thing that I like. And this definitely benefits everybody because I'm part of everybody. That makes it kind of selfish in a way. But whatever we can do to help get us back to where we were, because we're certainly on a road that hasn't helped us as citizens. It's taken away from us many of our God-given rights. And I hear people crying about our constitutional rights. They're not constitutional rights. They're God-given rights. The purpose of the Constitution was to literally document what the government is supposed to defend. And instead, we have a government that has outright attacked it. So we have ways that have allowed us to release that pressure, but many people don't know about them. And these two people I have a tremendous amount of information in that area. So before we go any further, what happened today in Texas?
Go ahead, John. To Texas, we had an assembly in Texas with to further the movement to reestablish Texas based upon the unconstitutionality of the Reconstruction Acts. This is something we feel we have a right to do. We have a good crowd down here. We have some motivation, and we're looking for other states. We've got that want to reestablish. So I've been talking all day, from morning until now. Not sure how well my brain is working, but I'll leave it in the capable hands of Milo and David to talk more about this. So
it was important for John to say hi, Riscalla, and he has been going all day today. Imagine hours and hours of putting really highly technical and significantly legal information in front of regular folks that don't have a background experience like that,
Mm-hmm.
that in of itself is a challenge.
Yep.
And John's done a tremendous job. I've learned a heck of a lot today, and I think over time we're going to be able to give people some really substantive, information that's going to help to provide remedy. I talk a lot about this idea that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We need a different set of steps to get the different result. And I believe that there's concepts here that can be very useful for regular, common, law-abiding American citizens that recognize the truth that they're not a citizen of their state anymore. And that was done through a surreptitious subversion 150 years ago or more for the purposes of giving control to the oligarchy, to the elitists, to those who want to keep us in a position where we're dormant and don't have the powers that we ought to have. And so, this is the kind of thing we've been talking about today, and it's really, Milo and I will expand on some of these ideas tonight with you. And anyway, John, appreciate he took a couple minutes to just say hi. And say goodbye, John, if you would, real quick. Okay.
Is he going to go take a break?
I'm going to sign off here. It's getting really late for me, and I'm going to take a break.
God bless you.
Guys, putting me on. Thanks.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you.
And so anyway, Milo Townsend's also on the line here. If you want to just say hello to Milo,
Hey,
Riscalla, and
welcome.
We'll just keep on.
Yeah, welcome aboard, Milo. Thank you for taking the time to share with us tonight.
It might remind everybody, Milo was the guy that called in last week, and we had that really great exchange about what the well-regulated militia is and how it functions.
Yep.
He's a member of the North Carolina delegation, works with John and has for a number of years. So anyway, Milo.
Hello.
Hey, Milo.
How are you tonight?
All right. I got a little bit of an echo, so somebody's got a speakerphone. If you got
we're too close to each other.
Oh, okay.
And I'm walking away now.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
sort of an ad hoc situation here, trying to get ourselves arranged. I'm sorry about that.
Not to worry. Wanted to quickly, for anybody who's missed the last two, what you really need to do is go back and listen to the last two shows so that you can get up to speed to what we're talking about tonight. But a quick covering. What we're trying to do is return the power to the states because it was stolen from them under deception. And that's really what our discussion is about, getting the states back to being the sovereignty of the state, returning the sovereignty of the state, and in turn having us become citizens of that state so that we're not under the guise of a federal government. It was never intended to be that way. Anyway, so what did you guys talk about today, Mona?
That's well said, Riscalla. I'd like to, this isn't really a correction as much as an adjustment of something you said earlier, because you mentioned the point of that we're sovereign citizens. But it's not the way that the sovereign citizen movement has articulated the point. It's that we, as the body politic, the term that I use is the polity, the way that people are organized politically, is the sovereign. We are a popular sovereignty. It's not like one individual maintains that sovereignty in his own, and it's because otherwise you'd end up with anarchy. Everybody would do what was right in his own eyes, as the Bible said in the book of Judges. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the people coming together in a body politic where the rule, the majority decisions that are made through proper process of law in open assemblies result in the position that the people then agree is the rule of law and what they follow. And that's, I think, an important distinction to make so that we're not ever classified by somebody hearing this down the road as being in the sovereign citizen movement or something in that respect. So I thought it was important. And Milo, why don't you share what happened today?
Yeah, sure. Well, Texas reestablished. They have actually reestablished March 2nd of, earlier this year. It was March 2nd of 2019. And it was a long process. We've been in conversations with a group of good people here in Texas for the past few years now. But what occurred today was an assembly meeting of their provisional government, and it was also an event to which many newcomers were invited from Texas in general, from the state. People who might possibly be interested in pursuing state citizenship. And as David clarified just a second ago, talking about the body politic, the polity of Texas, the state, and I don't want to get into too much technicality here right off the bat, but the state being composed of three elements, a body of people organized under a form of government, which would be a constitution, and exercising sovereign jurisdiction over a given territory, so a geographical territory. And, so when we say the state of Texas, there's really two, just like John explained previously that there were two states of North Carolina. These people have reestablished their state of Texas under the original 1845 Texas State Constitution. And that Constitution was the one that the people of Texas, ratified and implemented when they first entered into the Union of the United States, when they ceased to be the Texas Republic and became one of the several states in the Union. And so they have returned to that Constitution. So they've returned to the last lawful form of government that existed prior to the wrong that was committed in the form of the overthrow that was Reconstruction, the Reconstruction Acts and nationalization of citizenship. So they are claiming state citizenship, which, in law, that, state sovereignty accrues to them as a body of people on account of the form of government that they're claiming, that particular constitution, and the fact that they are swearing their oath of loyalty and allegiance to that constitution and their body of people as a state. So that's, in a nutshell, what's going on, and this was just one step in the process. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that part of what occurred today was the beginnings of them working towards drafting a proclamation so that they can give formal notice to the de facto entities, that is to say, the commonly recognized national government and the nationalized state of Texas that everyone thinks of when they think, Texas. So they're going to give notice of what they've done. They have done a declaration of reestablishment, and they have done their oaths and their affidavits of citizenship and domicile. So we do have a body of people that are reestablishing the original state of Texas on a lawful foundation, and this was just one step in that process.
So Milo, hang on, David. Let me ask Milo a question.
Sure.
In the reestablishment of Texas, what are the benefits of this now?
Well, everybody asked what are the benefits of being a state citizen, and it's a very good question, totally relevant. So I'll try to answer, but there's something that I've got to say. In answering that question, I've kind of come to the point where I have to sort of tell everyone that the benefits of this are long term. They are not like you've signed some paperwork, you can go in the court and say some magic words and they'll leave you alone and you can be free. It doesn't work like that. This is not, this is, as John Ainsworth has said often, this is not any kind of silver bullet. So the benefits that accrue to state citizens, living within a sovereign state, well, they're multifarious. I mean, they're numerous. But to put it in a very concise form, or at least as concise as I can, I'll say that the body of people in the United States today, somewhere on the order of around 350 million people, if my numbers are, if I remember accurately, that's a lot of people. The territory, I can't give you in square miles. I could go to Google and look it up, but it is an enormous territory. I mean, the United States as a whole. So you have one national government right now under the present circumstances. You have one national government that is trying to implement a policy, public policy, that comes down from a central location and is made one size fits all. So the answers are always intended to apply to everyone, all 350 million people in all these divergent and disparate regions of the country that all have their own problems, their own issues, they have their own obstacles to overcome. And the policy doesn't fit. I mean, the policy very, very seldom fits everyone like it ought to. It's an inadequate system. It's out of touch. I mean, you can add to that it is out of touch with the needs of the people more often than it's not. So those are the issues that plague nationalization and the nationalized system. And so state sovereignty gives the people back what David himself has referred to as sphere sovereignty, what I originally encountered as the idea of subsidiarity. It gives them back what people call home rule in a very significant way. On pretty much any issue that you can imagine, any question of public policy, a sovereign state would have the prerogative, unless the issue is specifically in the Constitution delegated to Congress to deal with, then anything outside of Article 1, Section 8 would be left up to the state. And Article 1, Section 8 is a very, very short list of things Congress can do. So that leaves pretty much everything up to the states to decide on their own, unless it falls within that short list of congressionally delegated items. So the states get to solve their own problems, and they get to do it in the ways that they feel like they should or can best address the issues that pertain to them. I mean, I could go into great detail on a number of specific issues, and perhaps later, if you want me to, I will on some. But that is, as best I can sort of summarize it, that it's home rule. It's putting back into place the federal system, the federal it was a federal constitution, so we're trying to put that back into place, but it's got to be a grassroots effort.
So does that mean that we'll end up having a different governor or a different representative? How does it affect the structure of representation for the people?
Well, when you deal with the constitutions that pertain to, in the instance of Texas, for example, I said that this state of Texas that we're here meeting with today, they reestablished under the 1845 state constitution, and the Texas that pretty much everyone recognizes commonly today, they're established under I presume it was 1867 or 8, one of those 2 years, because it was a Reconstruction Constitution, or the descendant of it. So the Reconstruction Constitutions, in particular for the 10 states that were directly reconstructed in 1867 and 8, those constitutions were a new title of governor, of title to claim to governance, claim to jurisdiction over the soil of the state. It was the same with North Carolina as it is for Texas, because both of us were directly reconstructed. So, yes, to answer your question fairly directly, it would mean you have new officers. I would certainly hope that if a majority or a significant number of Texians decided that they wanted to become involved in de jure government, become state citizens under the original Constitution, I would hope that they would elect somebody that's not a career politician and invested in this national system. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they would be electing someone who had spent their career and their lifetime implementing precisely the kind of overthrow and problems that we're here working to remedy. Mm-hmm. But it would be up to the people of Texas who would they want to elect to govern them. So the overall format, the overall big picture would be very similar in terms of how procedurally how government works. There'd be elections, and people would vote for their representatives, and they would vote for their executive officers just like they do in the de facto system. But the nuances of the different constitutions, and really also the significance of the change in the locus of sovereignty, that sovereignty under a de jure state resides with the state, and it would cease to reside in Congress. It would not be a national sovereignty anymore. The authorship of law would fall largely back to the people of the respective states. Those two facts really would change a lot about the way things are done in terms of policy and politics in general. for any state that chooses to reestablish, and ultimately later down the road for the entire union.
David, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Give me a second because I got one more question. Theoretically, if let's say that Texas goes through the process and is completely reestablished, is that the correct word? Reestablished?
That would work. That's what we call it.
All right. So it goes through the entire process. It's now reestablished. Does that give Texas the right to say, we're not sending any of our people out to your wars anymore?
I would, well, that would be difficult because you have to have, it's not like Texas is declaring independence. They're not they're not declaring a secession movement, so they're not trying to become the Republic of Texas again. They are trying to become one sovereign state. Actually, the technical term is a demi-sovereign state in a political union, a federal political union. So they would have as much right to refuse to send soldiers to unconstitutional wars as they would have had in 1859.
Okay, that's what I was getting after. So this is a way to circumvent this insanity, because these people, they realize that there's so much money in war that they just want to perpetuate more and more and more. And this would be a way to help circumvent that.
Right. It would be. And if I may add one thing to that, too, one of the caveats about war is that constitutionally, it is required to be declared by Congress. And we haven't had a declared war in, since World War II.
I think it was,
the last declared war.
Yeah.
So if Congress doesn't declare a war, a demi-sovereign state has the legal prerogative to say, well, you're not, you can't conscript troops from us because, you haven't actually declared a war. So one other thing, too, and David can speak more to this also, is that there is an element of what is a just war and what's not. And a just war is always a defensive war. So I would also like to defer to David to speak more about that. But in terms of what Congress is allowed to declare a war about, this whole business of just going out and exercising an imperialist agenda and saying we're going to go invade country X, Y, or Z on the basis of dubious information and intelligence, and really ultimately just because somebody has an interest in trying to acquire some
Exactly.
claim.
That's right.
That would come to a halt, I believe.
Great. All right, David, go ahead.
It's really in line with what Milo's been talking about. I just was going to make the point that, this is the beginning of a movement, the beginning of a process, even though John and people in North Carolina have been involved in it now since 1998. So it's not like it's brand new. And interestingly, during that whole period, as John has mentioned in previous shows, he's been pretty much left alone. It's not like they've, there's been a resistance that this is some kind of a fringe group or anything of that nature. He's gone into the courts and argued his point, and essentially it's been ignored many times, but they've been creating a record, and that's the key to this thing, is creating a legal record of what is the expectations or the demands. And I thought it was important to just say this, and that is in the scriptures it talks about, as Angel says, the biblical text. It says that we shouldn't despise the day of small things. When things are beginning to take root and beginning to take form, if you go back and think about the founding generation, when people like John Hancock and Samuel Adams got together and began to work with the committees of correspondence in 1772 in Boston, just got together the people in the Boston in Faneuil Hall and got them together to come together in a very small body politic. And then from there was some basic ordinances that were created, in which they then, that one committee of correspondence sent letters out to 188 counties in the province of Massachusetts. And out of that, about 80 or 90 of them began to get involved in communication with each other. And from there, you began to create a new body politic in the province of Massachusetts, or the county of Massachusetts at the time. And over a couple of more years, that turned into the establishment and creation of an entirely new country, the United States, first the United Colonies of America, and then the United States of America. And so the stuff we're talking about here might seem like it's really unusual to people's mind. It's something that they really can't wrap their minds around because it's so new and we've only been talking about this for 3 weeks on your show, and yet I'd like to encourage people to just sit and listen to this and then go do your own investigation. Take your time to maybe look at americasremedy.com's website and see what John has been articulating there. We're obviously going to continue to talk about this stuff in the weeks ahead, and people come to the place of making their own decision. I think we're smart enough, confident enough, and strong enough to govern ourselves, and this is absolutely an opportunity for us to prove whether that thesis is true or not. And so I just thought it was important to make that statement here. Let's not despise the day of small things and understand where we can be going with this, because anybody that experienced the atrocities that came about as a result of the mortgage bubble, where millions of people lost their homes because of something that was done to them by the international banking community and corporate interests, where they walked into a courtroom because of a foreclosure, because the economy collapsed on them, and they were given no relief, and their house was taken from them, and that was the first time in their life that they realized that something's not right here. We're now a decade later, and people are not quite as trusting anymore of the powers that be in the system that we're a part of, and many of them are asking real legitimate questions about whether we're going to even be able to continue as a society the way that we thought would be the great American dream and the land of the free and the home of the brave and all those other things that we've taken for granted as America. And so this is a new thesis, a new idea, a different way of achieving a different result. And so that was just some thoughts I wanted to share. Sitting next to me here is Paul Tompson. Paul is involved with the Texas group as well, and I wanted to take a minute and let you meet Paul, and maybe he can give a little bit of insight again on what's happened here in Texas, because he's one of the Texas people where I am not even in the organization at all, because Florida has no people involved at the moment. Milo is coming from North Carolina, but I'm going to have you meet Paul for a moment, if you don't mind, and let him say hi to Riscalla and get his point of view on this.
Sure.
Good evening, Riscalla.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for taking time to share with us. I appreciate it. Welcome to the Red Pill Reality Show, my friend.
Well, I appreciate being here. I've listened to the first show that you had with David and John, and I was intrigued that you're actually putting the stuff out there, and I appreciate that.
Well, here's one of my passions is that, first of all, I've been around. I've been around just a couple of moons. I have seen what this country has gone from and into. I was involved in the Vietnam War. I thought I was serving my country. I thought I was doing my duty to my country. And the short of it all, I found out that the war was based on a lie, that we killed people for nothing more than being able to take resources, which we never did end up taking. And before it was all said and done, they reported approximately 55 to 56,000 of my generation gone. I think it was a lot more than that. But the bottom line was, once I realized we'd been lied to about Vietnam, there was this sickness that had come over me, physically sick, that I was involved in this. And this fire burning inside of me, wanted to know more and more and more. And it was all really thanks to 9/11, because it was 9/11 that started it all. I just, too many questions. The more questions, instead of getting answers, I had more questions. And it just seemed like a never-ending snowball. So anytime that I can provide information for people that they can use to help us regain our country. A lot of people out there today don't really know the America that I grew up in. Imagine an America that was secure enough where my friend and I, we were probably 11 or 12 years old at the time. We hopped on a bus. I was living in Coral Gables, which is a small city inside of the Miami area. We hopped on a city bus. A city of Coral Gables bus, and we got on a Miami bus, and we went to downtown Miami. We spent the entire the entire day in downtown Miami. just looking around because we were so amused by the big buildings and all the people, and we came back. Now, can you imagine two unescorted young men, 11 or 12 years old, going to downtown Miami today? They probably would not be seen again. So this is what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for an America that I grew up in, where kids would go out all day long and not have to worry about being picked up by human trafficking or something horrible like that. I'm going for an America where people are held responsible for their individual decisions instead of pushing it away and blaming an entire group of people for something.
Well,
go ahead.
If I may speak. Now that was your youth. That was your childhood. That's the good times you remember. But that was your America.
Mm-hmm.
What if I told you that was not the America that was originally intended, that was given to us? That was a construct of our current society.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. The reason I bring it up, though, is to bring up the vast difference of what it was before, even though it wasn't intended to be that. I understand that. And to what it is today. But, certainly, we're not supposed to be what we are today.
Right. And if I don't know if you know 1913 General Medley Butler, a Marine general, is telling the Americans that war is a racket. Before World War I, before World War II, he's saying, yeah, I went and fought these wars for the benefit of the corporations. And still, we had Vietnam, we had Korea, we had, all these other wars. The problem is that we're not listening. We're not looking at the current problem. We're not looking at our history. We're not looking at the past to find out why are we repeating everything we've done. We continually do the same thing over and over because we believe in a false premise. Now, I'm here to talk about Texas and about what we've done into reestablishment.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know if you know my name, but I'm the provisional lieutenant governor of the reestablished state of Texas.
Great. Now, will they recognize that? That's the whole thing. Will they recognize that? That's
well,
after all is said and done.
It's not about recognition. It's about, do we have the legal right to do it? And we do. Because the United States government, back in the Reconstruction Acts, illegally told us that we are no longer a state. And John Ainsworth, Milo Townsend will agree and have evidence of this. And it's in the congressional record. It's in the it's in the newspapers of the time. Congress came in and said that you're no longer a state because you didn't pass the 14th Amendment. Now, what does that say? Do they have that right in the Constitution? Article 1, Section 8. Does Congress have the power to annul a state?
Not to my knowledge.
No, well, then, why do they do it? And that's our legal argument. Everything we do is about legality. We're not going to be militia. We're not going to be, load your guns and let's fight this, fight the federal government. No, we're taking our argument to court. If the court can prove they're legal, then, we'll pay your taxes. We'll pay we'll get your driver's license. But with that, I'm going to give it back to David. But I'm happy to be here to talk with you.
Thank you.
We can discuss this further.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
All right.
Very enlightening.
No problem.
Thank you.
Scott, I'm here.
All right. So a question that I have, with all of this going on, We know that these people, they'll resort to anything. There's nothing that they will not resort to. That I think any of us would agree upon. So as they're going through this process, I see parallels here with the Founding Fathers, what they went through with regard to separating this country from representatives and people who are taxing us without representation, the kingdom, if you will. And so they were threatened in many ways, and they were, even after succeeding on many fronts, they were still attacked. So my fear I don't think is the right word. My concern is that they will go out of their way to make life miserable for people in an attempt to persuade them not to do this. Has any of that occurred, or has any of that started?
Not really. And I can only go, and Milo might be able to answer this better than me, but I can only go by what I've heard being discussed today. Yes, when John first, I think he mentioned this even during a couple of the last two shows, that when he first began to go down this road, he did have a visit from a state Bureau of Investigation agent or two that were more concerned about the fact that in putting something like this forth, this was back in the late 90s when there was a lot of quote-unquote militia groups, which weren't militia, but that's what they call themselves. And there were others who were, vigilante of sort, and they get pulled over on the side of the road and somebody got hurt. And so that was what they were mostly concerned about. Since then, a few meetings whenever individuals within the organization may have had a traffic ticket they were disputing or a tax issue they were dealing with, there was, obviously because this is different and unusual, there was some response. But in general, no. It's pretty much being, I guess, lack of a better word, ignored. Okay? In other words, the question of substance is challenged in the court, or challenged in the court, or challenged with the agent. And at that point, they just let things just kind of be. And that's the worst that's happened up until the moment. And I think that there's a reason for that, Riscalla, and I think you would agree with this, and the listeners to the show would probably agree too, that we're doing something that is not common. I don't mean we, I mean the people in this organization, because I'm not even committed to it yet. But there's being something done here that is not status quo, and it's really something that is new to the legal mindset, or to those that are participating from either side. And so I believe what will happen here as this grows and as more people become involved, when they see that this has real legitimacy, that it has substance in law, that there's going to be a point at which it's going to gain more credibility, or that's not the word I'm thinking of. They'll gain more curiosity, but that curiosity, if it is as legitimate as it is appearing to be presented, that's going to have to get some people to get out of this mode. Those in power are going to have to actually answer to what's being presented. They're going to have to stand up. They're not going to be able to ignore this forever if it turns out to be legitimate. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it will be. And at that point, we'll have to see what happens. Remember, and again, my background experience is the study of the founding generation and the history of how our country came into being. There's many stories back in that period that you can legitimately read about, even through letters in many of the state archives, where when the founding generation was involved in disputes with the governors of certain colonies, the governors came back and, they've used a little bit of force. And at that point, there was resistance, and it turned into a position where they had to actually deal with the issues that were being, disputed. So at this point, that's not happening. There isn't that kind of, this isn't like some of the situations you've seen where folks, SWAT teams show up and take people away because, they're, doing things that are completely out of line. There isn't any This isn't that kind of thing where people are drawing weapons and threatening anybody. It's really a legal set of arguments for the purposes of establishing a record and a standing as state citizens versus being deemed national citizens. That's really where it's laying out at the moment.
Once we become state citizens, are we no longer under the authority of the Congress? Is that what we're after?
May I?
Go ahead, Milo. Sure, go ahead, Milo.
Oh, I was just going to offer. It's kind of like what the question was that you asked earlier, Riscalla, about war and whether or not the states have the authority to institute, to decline to send soldiers to fight in wars. Think of it this way. The short answer to your question you asked just now is no. By no means are you not under the authority of Congress. It's just that the predominant locus of sovereignty is with the states again, and Congress is restricted back into its federal limits as per the original Constitution. National citizenship, the 14th Amendment, what it did, what John and I have explained what John explained over the course of the last two shows and what I summarized a moment ago, national citizenship lodged the entirety of sovereignty in the national government, Congress. Now, this was all done unconstitutionally, so bear that in mind. That gives us the justification for refusing to acknowledge those acts that executed that change, because they were unconstitutional acts, and therefore they are not actually laws. But Congress always had authority within its proper sphere. Under the original Constitution, antebellum, I'll just say antebellum Constitution, prior to the War of Northern Aggression and the Reconstruction, prior to that, Congress had legitimate authority within the certain sphere of those powers that were delegated to it. And those powers obviously are listed in the Constitution so that everyone knows what they are. And within that sphere of authority, those sovereign states, demi-sovereign states, reestablishing now, would still be subject to Congress. They would still elect representatives to Congress. They would be bound to honor their part of the reciprocal agreement. Well, really, it is an agreement among states. It's a compact among the several states. And so we're just reestablishing those original several sovereign states. And by virtue of doing that, then we're reestablishing that federal union in lieu of the illegitimate national system that exists right now. So does that clarify?
I think so. It's still kind of a little confusing to me because...
Let me throw in another little piece that might help. Think of it like the swinging of the pendulum, right? Where there has been an extreme that has come into existence over the last century, in which the Congress has been given powers that greatly exceed what are articulated in the Constitution.
I agree with that.
And okay, so what we're talking about here is bringing things back into center, or bringing things back toward the center of the pendulum swing, where Congress absolutely has powers. They're all articulated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The powers to raise taxes and to create budgets for spending of money and for organizing, providing the regulations for the Army and the Navy, and for every 2 years having to refund the Army, and the parts that aren't even being utilized or practiced at the moment with respect to the militia statutes in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 15 and 16 have been completely ignored for the last century. So, and in my opinion, they are derelict in their duty as Congress to organize and do the functions that are provided for in those two statutes of the Article 1, Section 8. And many other things in there. They have the power to regulate commerce. They have the power to regulate money and coin and so on, as it talks about. So what we're talking about is a bringing back to a proper authority. Not that there isn't going to be a submission of the states. Article 1, Section 10 is the disabilities of the states, which is the powers that the states delegated to Congress. And those powers are going to be ones in which the states are going to submit. It's just that things are out of proportion. We've got an imbalance, and that has caused our civil government to become way overreaching. And I don't think there's a lot of people that don't see that today. The police state threat that we see, many people are experiencing it. The black community feels very oppressed by the government.
Yep.
We talk about police brutality types of issues, and the taxation, and the fact that when we go to our representatives and we lobby them and as individual citizens, not as lobbyists, but individual citizens write letters or they contact their legislatures, and then nothing changes, or they make decisions.
They laugh at us.
Take TARP, for example. I think that there were two things that people said when TARP was being proposed by Congress. They contacted their congressman by vast majorities and said either no or hell no. And it turned out that Congress did it anyway. And so, this is the thing I think that we're suggesting is that we need to come back into balance, and that balance will come about as we reestablish the state citizenship.
Wow. Kind of like what I learned many, many years ago. Take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. If you watch the pennies and the dollars take care of themselves. So if we take care of the states, then everything else will fall in line, and we will be back to where we're supposed to be, hopefully, prayerfully.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Let me going to take a break, and don't go away. You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. It's just so much information. My mind is still reeling from everything you guys are talking about. Part of this is a system. I do recognize that. Part of this is a system to keep people from talking about this kind of stuff, because this is, to these oligarchs, this is the danger. People, when we had slavery, one of the things that a slave master could literally be put in prison for was having his slaves learn how to read and write, because then they would have the power of understanding the documentation that's going on. So it wouldn't surprise me that these slave masters we have today, the modern slave masters, don't work that way. The way that they work is they dumb everybody down, and because it's easier to control them when they don't understand their rights, when they don't understand how things are supposed to work. They just think, oh, this is the way it is. There's nothing we can do about it. So this is, I'm very grateful, very, very ever so grateful that you guys have taken the time to share this with us, and glad that we're able to do kind of a follow-up, because I think this is vital. Absolutely vital for us to be able to regain our country back. All right, here we go.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
Grace has some pretty stellar arms, like Serena Williams good, but her face is pretty disgusting.
Someone please tell him to go back into his closet and leave us alone.
Brittany's face is so stupid and I hate her so much. It's like a scientist created her in a lab to annoy humanity and didn't even do that good of a job.
Megan reminds me of a troll doll that came to life intent on killing us with her stupidity.
Why is Grace's head so big? It definitely has nothing to do with how smart she is and probably everything to do with how bloated she is.
He's so funny. Just kidding. Who would find this disfigured flamingo funny?
Never post a selfie of yourself. You look so ugly.
The only reason you have so many views is because we think you're a freak and we can't look away.
Megan is the main reason that the world sucks so much.
I would rather get cancer than listen to another Trevor Moran song.
You are a mistake. You should have never been born.
Drown yourself in a shallow puddle, please.
Wow, I hope she's sterile.
These really stopped being funny a long time ago.
You're so much more than the things that people say about you.
Those people have no right to say cruel things to you to make themselves feel better.
It's okay that you sound different than everyone else.
That's what makes you so special.
We will not tolerate it. We will not tolerate it.
We will not tolerate it.
We will not tolerate it.
Every day, people make me feel like I stand out simply because of the way that I look.
Every day, people make me feel small.
Every day, I face the cruel words of bullying.
And every day, people tell me that I'm brave for enduring this humiliation.
But we're not the brave ones.
It's the ones that say no to the bullying.
The witnesses.
And if we all join together, there's nothing that we can't do. We will no longer be the silent majority.
When we see bullying online,
We will let the world know that we're going to take action with the eye.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
Our actions will overpower cruel words.
I am a witness.
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 There is power in words.
But it's nothing compared to the power of the actions that we put behind our words.
Visit eyewitnessbullying.org to learn more.
I am a witness, and so are you.
I'm gonna stand by you.
Better than Late Night in the Midlands.
There's nothing better than Late Night in the Midlands. I love to talk to people from the heartland. They're tremendous people, they really are.
Opinions, politics.
I'm going to give you 10 minutes tonight because you're tremendous people.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, she's a horror show.
Elizabeth Warren. Pocahontas.
But I mean, Elizabeth Warren, I love my Pocahontas. She is the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh, and good old Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, oh my God, what a communist. He's not even a socialist. He is such a communist.
Then there's Sloppy Joe. Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Joe Biden. Every time he sniffs a little girl's head.
You heard the man. Nothing better. Late Night in the Midlands. We cover everything.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Goes, 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 goes.
Now, from sunny South Florida, it's the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla. Every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to midnight on the L&M Network. And now, your host, Riscalla.
Okay, we are back. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. An honor and a privilege to have you listen in tonight. And very important information coming across. If you're concerned about the future of our country, if you have burning passion for returning this country to the intention, the way it was intended to be, you're going to want to listen to this show. Any archives. We'll have the show up on the archives. There's 3 of them now that we've done with regard to this subject. And with each one, I'm constantly finding out more and more. It is, I know for me, it is, it can be quite daunting because it's information that, it's kind of sad in a way. There are people who know more about football or some kind of sport. Maybe it's not fair to pick on football. It just happens to be a popular sport. But there are people who know more about sports, the individual players in the sports, the scores that they've got, all of the information on the data on them than they knew about our government. And knowing all of that about football or baseball or golf or whatever it might be is not going to help your personal life from day to day. Knowing about what we're talking about today, tonight, is going to help you build a future for your children, for your grandchildren. I'd like to be able to know that we've done something to help rectify. I mean, you'd have to be sleeping under a rock not to realize something is not right today. There is something just not right with the way things are today. I don't think we were ever intended to be under a situation where we literally have a militaristic police that are supposed to protect us. Then we have situations where the police will say, well, it's not our job to protect you. And if you think I'm lying, go back and look at the Parkland incident that happened here in Florida when they determined it wasn't up to the police to protect the children. It's insanity. Somehow we have to rewrite this thing that is out of balance and put it back into balance. And what we're talking about tonight is a legal way to do that. Anyway, let me welcome back David and welcome back Milo. I appreciate so much you guys sharing with us because, again, we don't talk about this stuff anymore.
Well, I can't thank you enough for having us on. It's great that this is getting out there on the radio, on a podcast, or on the internet. Thank you for helping to disseminate this information. Something that you said before the break, Riscalla, was that people just aren't aware, and you returned to that as soon as you came back from the break about what they are aware of and what they do know and immerse themselves in. But yeah, this information really is key. I mean, this information, the dissemination of knowledge is absolutely imperative. Without that, we're powerless.
Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Dave.
It is. And I think you touched on this, and I'd like to kind of amplify what you've kind of mentioned. We are experiencing in our day, as Americans today, threats that when you and I were young, and I'm a few years younger than you, but not many, we never would have even thought of happening in our society. You mentioned that you went down to Miami with your friend and just at a young age. Yeah. I remember when I was a little kid in the little town I lived in, walking down the street at night. It was after dark, and there was a 2-lane road that went through our town, and a tractor trailer drove by and pulled over to the side of the road. And I was just walking, on that side of the road, and he got out of the tractor trailer and he said, "Were you needing a ride to town?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Okay, fine." And he got back in the tractor trailer and took off down the road.
Yeah, if someone did that today, they'd be accused of kidnapping.
Exactly. That things have changed so dramatically in our society. And one of the things that I've thought about many times is, why is it that we're in the position we are? And it has to do with the incremental changes in society over time, because the standards of society have changed that much. The basic principles by which we live. We don't live in a day today where the principles of biblical Christianity and the Western concepts behind that are still the fundamentals of our country. We live in a day when there's even a question as to whether there are such a thing as absolutes in our society. There's just an entire change philosophically in the way that we live, and this is a fundamental problem that is very critically important for us to realize. The ideas have consequences that we believe and we practice on a daily basis in our society. And that's, one of the pieces. Another would be just the way in which the government intrudes and operates in our personal lives these days. These are the kinds of things that people are beginning to understand are there, and the question is, what can we do about it? What are we able to actually take back into our own hands and fix ourselves? Not depend on a top-down answer, but a bottom-up answer. I think it's important that we realize that we do have some bottom-up answers, and this is just one of them that we're addressing at the moment. Riscalla, as we move forward, we're going to talk about others and ways that we can take back our society, take back our communities. I believe that there is hope, that there are some remedies that we have the ability to consider and think about and apply. But I think that this thing that John Ainsworth has brought to our attention is a pivot point. It's something that literally can give people a approach, a way to do something that could literally turn a tide. I think that it's got that kind of legitimacy. Not that it by itself may be the answer, but I think it's one of those pivot points or a fulcrum that may have some value moving forward.
I think that people are, like you said, I think that people they're seeing that some things are just not the way they should be. And generally speaking, I think many of them may be frustrated. I know I was for a long. I see things are not right, and I'm watching people walk free that, my God, if I did 1/1000th of what they did, I'd be so far behind bars I'd never see daylight again. But yet here they are walking free, smiling, having a joyful time. So we know that there's things that are just absolutely out of kilter, absolutely. And then I found out about you, Dave, and your ideas, and then you turned me on to John and his ideas, and I think that this is a positive direction. This is something I've said many times before I had any of these conversations with any of you. I have said many times, if you're going to be a citizen of the United States, you have a responsibility. And part of that responsibility, you should know how things are run. And we don't. Generally speaking, we don't. We don't have an idea how things are supposed to be done and how things are run. And when someone like you comes along and someone like John and Milo and share your information with others, that to me is one of the most priceless things that we can do, because knowledge is where the power is going to be. It's going to be in the knowledge. If you had, I talk about guns a lot on my show because I believe in the right of self-defense, that we have a God-given right to self-defense, that this government has no authority to remove any of that. That's a whole nother story. But my point being is that if you had a gun and you didn't have the knowledge how to use the gun, then the gun is of no value. If we have a government and we don't know how the government is supposed to work, then they can get to do whatever the heck they want to do. And what happens? They are really, generally speaking, of no value to me. They're not of any value to me. I think I could honestly say to the majority of the American citizens, there are people within our government who are absolutely no value to the people. None. So what are we going to do about that? Well, here is an option for us to look into, a legal option. I've said many times, if we're going to beat these people, we have to beat them at their own game. Their game is all laws. They give you all these laws. Even though they're unconstitutional, they still pass the law. You got to obey the law. All right, well, what if we bring up laws that show that they don't have the authority that they have? What if we bring up laws that prove that they have deceived us, which any contract that is conceived under deception is null and void? And that's really what all is said and done. Isn't that what we're talking about, Dave? That we are in a contract that has been conceived in deception, and therefore that contract, for those of us who understand what's going on, is null and void. Am I wrong or am I right?
That's well said. I'll let David answer, but I just wanted to say that is an excellent way to say it.
Well, and thank you, Milo, for encouraging me. There's a case called Norton versus Shelby County, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was a Supreme Court case in which essentially what it says is that any law that is unconstitutional is null and void from its inception, as if it was never written. It gives no one any office. It has no power. It's essentially like I said, that it wasn't even put on the books. And any time that anything is put in front of us that gives the appearance of being the law, but it doesn't conform to constitutional rigor, it's got no power over us. And this is part of what we're trying to help people understand, is that we don't have to accept what the government tells us to do if it violates the Constitution. It violates the supreme law of the land.
May I add real quick? No, I just want to add, not only do you not have an obligation not to obey, I would go so far as to say that you do have an obligation not to. It's more than just that you have the right to refuse to obey an unconstitutional act. The fact of the matter is, you have an obligation to refuse to obey an unconstitutional act. You have an obligation to refuse to recognize it and obey it.
Let's take this another direction. Many people, I think, listen to this show, and many Americans still give some sense of respect to George Washington as the father of our country. It's not quite the way it used to be, I think, but generally speaking, I think people still give him a sense of reverence and respect for having been so well emulated back in the day. And George Washington said something very interesting, Riscalla, in one of the quotes of him. And I guess I'll turn it into a question. I'm an educator, and I like to do pre-quizzes, okay? Remember the pre-quiz in school where, you go into the classroom and you sit down and the teacher pulls out says, take out your paper and pen, and here's a question on the board or some questions. I want you to answer these. But the teacher wasn't asking the questions to give you a grade. The teacher was asking the questions to make sure that when he or she is going to teach, that they're going to teach something that you didn't already know. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I, by the way, I've taught in the public schools for 8 years myself. I homeschooled 5 kids through high school and all the way through into early college before I even became a teacher. And so this is just one of the things I do in educating. And George Washington one time made a statement that there was something that he believed to be the most important science to teach our children. The most important science to teach our children. What do you think that he thought that science was?
Knowledge.
Not quite. It was the science of government.
Oh.
He said no species of knowledge was more important to teach for the future stewards of our society than the science of government.
Well, kind of right.
Yeah, you
kind of, sort of.
You didn't hone in on this particular knowledge enough. Yeah. Okay. Well, think about. Have you ever heard of the term science of government?
That's the first I've heard it tonight. That's the first time I've heard that.
The point is that he believed that was the basis upon which we maintain a free society. And the science of government is the science of how we are supposed to interact in our relationships in society according to law, according to our relationships in our communities. How are our communities supposed to function? What are we supposed to be doing in our relationships to our neighbors and to, in doing commerce in our community and transacting with money and those kind of things. And how do we deal with the people that are breaking the law? How do we elect people to public? All these things. He said it's the most important thing to teach our children. And by the way, I believe over the last at least century that we have been very uneducated. We have been undereducated in the science of government. In fact, I call it perpetrated ignorance.
Dumbed down. Purposely.
Yeah, perpetrated ignorance. In other words, it was intentionally put in place that we would not. It's not what the things we were taught. It's the things that we were not taught. That we've never been given certain information so that it would be more difficult for us to know what we ought to do. And by the way, it's not just our educational system that's done this. It's our media.
Yeah.
It's our government. It's our professional organizations. It's our corporate interests, and it's our civic and religious institutions have all contributed to this perpetrated ignorance. And it's also because of the fact that we haven't been properly taught that when we get into conversations with one another, we're not talking out of knowledge. And we're giving each other bad information, which also perpetuates the ignorance. And, we will perish if we don't have the right knowledge.
Amen. Yep. I agree.
So, I think it's important for us to take and recognize the duty, as Milo said, the obligation that we have. But I go a step further. I believe we also have a duty that we need to take very seriously, that we've got to start taking some time and learning some basic things that we haven't been willing to take the time because we've been busy or preoccupied with just survival or whatever. If we keep going down the road where we're not willing to take the time to learn what we need to know, then like that phrase that I've shared before, they who cannot remember the good past are going to get what's coming to them. And they who can't remember cannot remember the bad past are going to suffer for it. We've got to learn the things that we need to know in order that we can achieve the end game that we want, which is our freedom.
I go back to the knowledge, and I use the example about the gun. You can have the best weapon in the world. If you don't have the knowledge on how to use that weapon, it is of absolutely no value to you. And what we're trying to do is give people the knowledge on how to get our government back in line with the way it's supposed to be, because it has not been in line for a long time, a lot longer than I've been around. And I think that people are getting fed up. Truly, I think that people are getting fed up with what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, what's happening literally before our eyes, where we have people who get paid quite handsomely, I might add, do nothing. How many of you could last at your job if you showed up 1/3 of the time at the job? Hey, boss, I'm not coming in to work today. Why? Well, I don't know. I just don't feel like coming in. You're supposed to work 5 days a week, and you end up working 2 days one week, 3 days the next week. How long do you think you're going to last at your job? Because that's what these people have done to us. And not only that, how would you like to have a job where this is how they've abused the system and abused us, essentially? How'd you like to, Mr. Smith, I'll give you a job. First of all, you can't be fired from the job. It's really going to take quite a bit of work to get you to remove from the job. But don't worry, even if you are fired from the job, we're going to make sure that you get paid just about the same as you did when you worked for the rest of your life. And God forbid, if you die, if your spouse is still alive, we're going to make sure that she's taken care of as well. You'll have the Cadillac products when it comes to financial retirement or health care. You won't have to worry about anything. Oh, and by the way, you can only have to come to work 1/3 of the time. How'd you like a job like that?
Are you talking about an analogy for how elected representatives?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say this, Riscalla. They work very hard, but not in the interest of the people.
Well,
they work
I
very
agree.
hard at getting reelected and
true.
accruing the financial resources for their reelection campaigns, and they work very hard at keeping us, as you've said and as David has elaborated, dumbed down and ignorant. And they work very hard at maintaining their self-imposed superiority over the rest of us. So they do work hard, but it is not in our interest.
I'll go along with that. I'll agree with that. And I think, again, if we go back to just a very basic thing, when we look at the days of slavery, the one thing that a slave master could get in serious trouble for, have his life threatened, was to allow the slaves to be able to read and write. That would give them the power to know what is going on. It's documented before them, where they didn't know how to read and write. So just that basic educational right of being able to know how to read and write the language was forbidden for the slave masters to give the slaves. It boils down to, in my opinion anyway, it boils down to knowledge. They did not want them to have knowledge.
You're right. You're right.
And that's what we are experiencing today. And what we're talking about today is vital knowledge. This is stuff that can affect literally our personal lives. It saddens me that people are comfortable with how far this government has literally injected themselves into our lives, into the privacy of our lives. They have people feeling, well, it's okay. It's not okay. And they have people believing, well, if you have nothing to hide, then you should have nothing to worry about. That's not the point. The point is I have my privacy. And my privacy is not up to you to invade. You don't have the authority to do that, but a lot of people don't understand that. They don't have the authority to make us buy Obamacare, but look at what happened. It went through anyway. They don't have the authority to tell us, whether either at the state level or the federal level, that you are mandatorily going to be vaccinated. They don't have that authority, but yet they're able to get away with it. Why? Because the majority of the people don't understand. They don't have that authority. They just think they do.
I want to say I like the fact that you're making the distinction. This actually came up today during the event that we had here in Texas. John was given a presentation, as he is often known to do, and he was taking questions and discussing things with the crowd. And one of the issues that he made a point to elaborate on is the distinction between authority and power. So authority has legitimacy. Power, on the other hand, is strictly raw power. It simply means you have the ability. You may not have the may, but you have the can. So I like the fact that you're making that distinction, and I just wanted to point that out because that's incredibly important. That people realize that the authority is supposed to emanate from them. They are supposed to be the source of authority for all the actions of government, and government should never be able to do anything that an individual would not have the right or the authority to do on his own of his own power.
Amen.
Of his own.
That's right. But they don't they don't want people thinking along these lines. They will consider people like, well, they would consider, and this would not surprise me, and I'm not exaggerating, they would consider a conversation such as we are having tonight domestic terrorism. I'm talking about the oligarchs.
Yes, they would.
I'm talking about the oligarchs,
Yes,
the people who have been in power for so long. Because again, they are the slave masters, and the slaves are waking up, and the slaves are doing the most dangerous thing that they can possibly do other than become violent, and that is to have the knowledge that it would take to remove these people. That scares the bejeebies out of them.
What we are doing, what we are talking about, is even within the context of what I have come to refer to over the years as the de facto system, even within the context of their own statutes, there's nothing that we're doing that is illegal. It's not illegal yet to speak freely about what the law does and does not allow of people or of the government. And so I agree with you. There are certainly those out there that would level the accusation that this at least borders on a form of domestic terrorism or that we're extremists or something like that.
Right.
But those people would be mistaken. And the day that those statutes are amended or altered to preclude or prohibit this kind of conversation is the day that we know that they have there should be no doubt in anyone's mind at that point that the powers that be have an agenda to reduce us, as the Declaration of Independence said, to reduce us under an absolute despotism. And they've all but done it already, and people should be aware of it now. But I mean, the evidence is so prolific. You can't even avoid it if you have your eyes open. But
they're doing it right now, Milo. This is happening right now.
They are.
If I might interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
This thought into this conversation, I think this flows from it. We are in a position at the moment which could be very near to a tipping point, but it may be that if we can have this conversation and we can get people to embrace the conversation, become a part of it, and begin to think it through, we may actually be able to mitigate the potentialities of what is coming. Because knowledge, as you said, Riscalla, results in power. John mentioned it, I think, when he was visiting for a moment with us too. But the point is that if we understand what is happening and can somehow get our minds wrapped around what is the threats that are being perpetrated against us, and we can see that this is going on and understand that we have some solutions that can help us to deal with these things. If we can understand the thing I think I talked about a little bit last week is the relevance. What's the relevant things that we need to be focusing on in order that we can save ourselves and our country, that we can give ourselves that empowerment that we should have? That's where I see the value of this conversation. For example, let's think about just what has been done to get us in this position over a long period of time, going back even as much as a century and a half, or even a little longer. There's been things that have been being attempted for the purposes of putting us into the situation we are now. We haven't gotten to where we are today because this happened overnight.
Amen.
The things that have happened over the last 150 to 170 years is why we are having this conversation tonight. There's been a divesting of the power of the citizenry of this country, where we used to have serious powers and rights and duties and privileges and immunities that we don't have anymore. And they were taken from us without our even knowing that they were taken from us. I say this when I talk to people. I look at it like it was a date rape. We didn't know it was being done to us, and it was done and we were violated without our even having knowledge of the violation. That's how bad this is. This isn't something where we just wrang our hands when we saw it coming and went, "Oh my gosh, look what they're doing." This was done in an underhanded, surreptitiously subversive way. And the thing that's interesting, Riscalla, I think you know that I've written a pretty long book on the subject. It's called The Political Matrix. That's the name of the book.
Yep.
It's a PDF at the moment. And I know you have a copy. I probably haven't had a chance to look at much of it. But
in and out. Yeah.
It's a very enlightening book. It's got information in it that I didn't know, and maybe other people did, but I'm not finding a lot of. Like, for example, in 1851, Horace Mann, who was the superintendent of schools of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, proposed that there be a new law put in place for compulsory attendance in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it got passed. It was the first compulsory education law in the entire country, and that was in 1851. Up until then, there was no state that had a law that compelled any child to go to school anywhere in the country. Over the course of the next 67 years, every state in the Union put in place a compulsory education law. Now, why would that be important? Because if its children are compelled to be educated, and they were compelled that they had to be in school for a certain number of years, between the ages of, depending on the state, between the ages of 5 and 17. Okay, in some states it's 7 and 17, and some it's different depending on the state. But they are compelled that they have to be educated for 10 months of the year in a public school system, okay, or in a private school system if they're not publicly educated. Then there has to be a curriculum created to educate those children. And the question then becomes, who is going to provide that education? And then what comes along is changes in the law, and this is ironically going back to what John and Milo and the people in this movement are suggesting, is that because of the 14th Amendment, there comes a point in time in the early 1960s where the schools cannot any longer allow the Bible to be read in school. And the children can't pray to God in the school. And this isn't because everybody in the country decided that they should be kept from doing this. It's because one individual or a few individuals went into a court and argued that we should not have to be, this should not be the law of the land. And that one individual got everybody in the country, even those who would have preferred to have their children be able to pray in the school or read the Bible in the school, they could no longer do so because of the 14th Amendment. Okay?
It's those one-size-fits-all solutions again, coming from the top down and expected to be applied to everybody throughout the entire, well, at that time then it had become a nation, so throughout the entire nation.
So, David...
And it doesn't matter whether in some states the people of that state really wanted to keep it that way or not. It became universal, ubiquitous across the entire society by one person's complaint.
Let me give you a theoretical situation. So, using that example, if the states were now sovereign instead of being involved in a federal
national control,
would not, I'm trying to figure out how to word it so it makes sense. Would the state then have the right at that point to say, this is not going to go for us? Are they able?
It becomes a state prerogative.
Yeah.
It's a state prerogative at that point, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And what you do is and this goes back, if you remember in previous shows, I've talked about the principle of subsidiarity and sphere sovereignty. The fact that every problem is a local problem, and local problems ought to be dealt with at the source of the problem, which is in the local community, and that there are three things that need to be considered in dealing with those problems. Whether the people have the authority, they have the mechanism, and they have the access to the information at the local level to deal with it, and don't need to go to another level of government to solve it unless they cannot. And that other level of government has they have no authority to deal with that problem unless the locality cannot deal with it. And that's the way that things ought to be functioning in this society.
Right, a higher level of government would have to be requested or sought after their influence, their input, right, David?
Well, unless there's a constitutional requirement that they would intercede. You see, if there was an obligation that the state has to, take authority in a certain situation because it's not being dealt with locally, then obviously they would deal with it. But it should be coming from the bottom up. And this is interesting because there's actually a set of cases that go back to the 1800s, which kind of illustrate that this is a conflict that has gone on in the past where the courts have actually come down on both sides of this. There's a doctrine out there that's called Dillon's Rule. And Dillon was a Supreme Court justice. He was the Supreme Court, what's the guy that's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Iowa back in the 1800s. And he ruled in this case in what has been known as Dillon's Rule, Dillon's Rule. And what he ruled is that in terms of how a ruling takes place where the state is involved or a local community is involved, the state is considered the parent and the local community is considered the child or the child or the daughter. And if the state deems that a certain law is the case and the local community puts together a contradiction to that law, the state supersedes the local community. And that's Dillon's Rule. And this has been used over the recent years by the big box stores coming in and filing that they might put in a Walmart or a Best Buy or a Home Depot or whatever. And the local community doesn't want to have this particular store in their community because it's going to mess up traffic patterns and make it much more difficult for people to get around their town. So they petition to the county commissioners to say that they don't want the store. And Dillon's Rule comes along and says, the regulations say as long as they fulfill the regulations, the state says that they can put the store in place, and the county commissioners have no say.
And I have seen that happen. I have witnessed that.
It's happened in many different industries. It happens with sludge, the pipeline being put through Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and the people protested the pipeline coming through, and they had no say in the matter, or even out at Standing Rock in the Midwest. Or it's happened, there's a number of different situations where this has happened. Interestingly, though, there's another United States or state Chief Justice of a Supreme Court in Michigan by the name of Cooley. And there's the Cooley Doctrine, which was in the 1800s. And what Cooley said is that constitutionally, the local community is the sovereign. And that was ruled in a state Supreme Court ruling. And the question that you raise is, why did Dillon's rule take precedent over the Cooley Doctrine? Why, when both of them were rulings of a state Supreme Court, and yet one has become the predominant position and the other one has been thrown out? And it has everything to do with public policy being established because of the system as it exists in the current situation in our society. Bar associations make decisions, they pass it down as policy through the court, and it becomes the supreme law. And so I'm pointing this out as an example of how we've gotten in the boat that we are because the people are not practicing subsidiarity. We are not practicing the rule of law in which the people are ultimately making decisions anymore. We've been trumped. We've been co-opted by a system that has taken away the authority of the individual, the authority of people in the community. I would even go so far as to say, and we could have an entire show on this in the future, that our vested authority has been removed from us. Vesting
well, it has.
Is the idea.
It has.
What's that?
It has. You can witness.
Yes.
We see that today.
And I can show you how it's been done. By the way, it's not just through the 14th Amendment and the Reconstruction Act, but it's also by what happened over the next 60 to 70 years with what we talked about last week with respect to the well-regulated militia of the several states being completely eliminated from our society to the extent not only that we don't have it, but that in having conversations about it, it's almost like you're going to be, ostracized for even having a conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Riscalla has already noted that these kind of conversations are viewed by many people, not just in government, but even among the general population, as bordering on domestic terrorism. So, I mean, yes, definitely.
Much of that has been brought on by conditioning.
It has, and that's really unfortunate.
They don't even realize that they've been conditioned to respond in that manner.
And they don't realize that let me just throw this in there, they also don't realize that they themselves, if they were willing to have these conversations and engage in the solutions that, the law offers them, they would be the ones to benefit. The people in general would be the ones to benefit from this. They would be taking back their authority to self-government and self-determination, and they would be basically giving themselves the power and the authority to eliminate their own subjugation and
to govern themselves.
It is such a sycophantic, if that's a word, I guess, I suppose it is, but it's what sycophants do. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome, honestly.
Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I lost my train of thought because that was so profound that I lost my train of thought.
I thought you were getting ready to say something. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
Well, it's again, much of what you say, it strikes a chord of truth within me, and I hope and pray that those who are listening feels the same about it, because it strikes a chord of truth. If you know anything about our country at all, it was about some people who, and again, I'm going to make it the Reader's Digest version, but it was about some people who it was about some Davids, if you will, who stood up to a pretty big Goliath. And they thought that it would never work. And yet, when it was all said and done, these group of people were able to stand up to an entire country and say, no, we're forming our own country. We're not doing this anymore. And we're doing it because you have abused us. You have abused us on many different levels. And we want the right, we have the right, God has given us the right to govern ourselves. And that's how all this whole thing basically started. But it has been, what do you call it? It's been corrupted so severely that it's not even a glimpse of what it was originally intended to be. These people who are up there in what we call our government, our Congress people, our representatives, our senators, they're paid so handsomely. It was never intended for this to be a career for any of them. It was intended to be very similar to when someone goes into the service, the military service. You go in, you're serving for the country. You're not there to become a multimillionaire in a short period of time. But yet that's what we see over and over and over again. Somehow, some way, we need to be able to regain that idea of serving again. And I see this as a viable means of doing that. And bringing these people back to eat some humble pie, if you will, because I think that's the problem. They haven't had any humble pie, and so they don't think that it exists for them, that it exists for their followers, for the people who vote for them, but it's not for them. Just like they'll pass laws to take guns away from us, and then we find out later they're the ones carrying all the guns.
You're bringing up a point, Riscalla, that I think is really, really relevant, and that is this whole issue of legislative privilege. I talked about history and about how we need to learn from the lessons of history. And the thing that's really cool when you go back and you begin to study founding documents and the things that were being put together back in the 1770s, there's a lot of language in those documents that is very common sense oriented. In the Maryland Resolve, which is one of the sets of documents that was put together by the Convention of the Association of Maryland in about July or August of 1774, just before the starting of the First Continental Congress, which happened in September of 1774. In one of the paragraphs of that document, it says resolved that and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me, maybe next week when I'll be able to have my computer in front of me, I can share it with you. But it was actually a statement that we're kind of hearing people wanting to, if you hear it on the internet, you'll see sometimes that people put out posts, and one of them is that we need to create a law, a amendment to the Constitution where representatives will be bound by the exact same conditions of a provision like Obamacare or Social Security or whatever that everybody else has. Yep. And in this particular paragraph in the Maryland Resolve, it said that the people that are in elected positions will be bound to be obligated to the exact same laws that the people that they are serving, and that there will be no differentiation. And this is actually something that they put in the resolves to go up to the First Continental Congress in Maryland. And so, more things change, the more they remain the same, if you know what I mean, right? And so, where does this double standard come from, where these folks that have been elected, that they've gotten the privilege of being elected to an office to serve their constituency, are for some reason feel that they have an entitlement that nobody else has?
And it is not just with regard to health care and retirement benefits either. I mean, Riscalla, I haven't listened to your show, for a very long time, only as long as I've known David, and David and John originally got on your show, and that was the first time I'd ever listened. But I heard you mention earlier that you have a particular passion about speaking with regard to firearms and the right to carry. Mm-hmm. I mean, first I'll just say that, I share that with you. That is, that's something that we have in common. But beyond that, I want to add to David's point just now is that, I mean, when you have legislators and congressmen who, and judges as well, who are allowed to carry and who are in possession of what amounts to the power of the sword with regard to not only individual self-defense, but also with regard to the power that they wield legislatively and with regard to the executive branch, by virtue of being commanders, essentially, civil commanders over the military power. When they have the authority alleged authority, when they have at least the power of the sword at their disposal, but they express and act upon an evident willingness to deprive the very people from whom their authority is supposed to evolve, when they have the evident intent to deprive those people of that same power and those same rights, that's just, I mean, that is the ultimate example of a terrible and should be totally unacceptable hypocrisy.
Well, let's go even further than that, Milo, since you bring that up. And do you need to take a break, Riscalla, before we go on to the next thing?
We got about 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Let's take this to another step, another level, and I think, Milo, you'll appreciate this. We talked about this on our drive out to Texas. Gun control is essentially an act of treason, because if you go to the definition of treason in the Constitution, it has to do with levying war against the United States or in giving aid and comfort to their enemy. And when you sit and you look at what we are doing by taking away the weapon from the citizen, and I'm not going to be able to articulate this anywhere near as well as we could go into, because it's a very legal, treatise. But when you think about what treason was in common law and in Blackstone's commentary, he goes through it. We are to give allegiance to the sovereign. In British common law, it was the king. In the Declaration of Independence, that sovereignty moved from being the sovereignty of the king to being the sovereignty of the people. The people are the sovereign. And if the sovereign people are being threatened by the lesser servant, then that is considered to be, if it's in the sense that which the sovereign is threatened to the place that their life is threatened or their authority is threatened through some means of levying war against them, then that is considered a treasonous act. If in any sense and this is being done by a group of people coming together in some sort of a combined effort where they are levying a sense of war against the people, then that's a treasonous act, and it doesn't have to be the actual action of evoking war, even if it's to the extent that they're simply taking away the ability of the sovereign to defend himself, or themselves, being the people, way before the actual imposition of the act of the war. And even if it's got to do with simply being involved in conversations which might be alluding to the possibility of levying war, that is also a treasonous act. So when these politicians are, even at this point, figuring out how they're going to reduce the ability of the people to defend themselves in a future provocation of war, then that is the same as levying war, and that is a treasonous act. So we have, and I'm giving a really, Reader's Digest point of view of this, and I'm probably not even articulating it very well, but the point is that every single legislator in every single state or at the federal level who is attempting to reduce the ability of the people to defend themselves ultimately in a well-regulated militia, if they're taking away the militia or they're taking away the weapon, they are committing treason.
Or even if they're...
Oh, go ahead, Riscalla.
I was going to say, even if they're infringing, then maybe they're not going to take away your weapon. Now you have to have a license, and we have to approve of your license. Or you can only have 5 rounds. You're not allowed to have 30 rounds. All of that. None of that is under the Constitution. So in my view, they've taken an oath to defend the Constitution. If they have broken their oath, that's good. If they have broken their oath, kind of making up words as I go along. If they've broken their oath, are they not under the guise of treason? Is that not treason, the breaking of the oath itself?
That is.
Well, it's the act that is the treason.
May I add something here? I think that it is important, and I'll say this in preparation for the remarks that I'm about to make. I think it's important to note that the conversation that David and I had about this coming down here, it was a 14-hour drive for us, roughly, and we had a long time to talk about this, and it got a little heated. The position that John and I come from, I've been involved in, it's basically, we come from the position that we have a legal argument, and state citizens and the 14th Amendment and the Reconstruction Act and all of that give us a legal argument, and it's an argument that we've had in the courts on many occasions. So that's our original perspective. David's original perspective, and it is perfectly, it has a great deal of value and validity, and I'm not trying to say that David is wrong in anything that he's saying, but I've got to point out here, at the risk of provoking a bit of a little discussion, which might not be a bad thing, but at the risk of that, I want to point out that when David says the people, I would qualify that. There is, constitutionally speaking, one category of people that have that prerogative and that right and that authority in law, and those are the peoples of the respective states. Those are the peoples that Congress is or has assaulted and committed treason against. The nationalized body of people, the singular national body politic, is a whole different kind of people. And even though those people may have natural rights that do properly and ought to be recognized because they emanate or descend from the deity, those people have, by virtue of their willing and voluntary acceptance of a particular legal status as national citizens, they have essentially in law, they've given up those constitutionally derived rights. And so the 10th Amendment, the Second Amendment, those things, I won't say they don't qualify or they don't apply, but they definitely have been redefined in order to apply differently to a national body politic. So it's a little bit misleading to say that a modern politician in America who is intent upon executing some kind of gun control law or act, I'll say act because really none of it is law, but it's a little misleading to say that any of those politicians are actually committing treason on the basis of the fact that they are intending or actually removing the people's arms or ability to defend themselves. I mean, when you say the people, again, and I'll come back to this, is that when you say the people who have a right to defend themselves, constitutionally speaking, those are the people of the states, and that's an important distinction to bear in mind. You have to, in my opinion, have the proper legal status in order to properly invoke that right and to assert it.
What I would suggest, Milo, is that it will be more difficult for them to assert it. Not that it's impossible, but that it may take that they have to go through a few more steps of process if they have an opportunity to levy the charge. But yeah, we could probably go on for a while and have a good debate about that. I think that the point that we're trying to focus in on here is the point of the offense, that there's not anybody that's really arguing or bringing to the fore, and that is, are the people that have been elected to public office at the state or at the general government level, at the level of Congress and the courts, federal courts, even if the president were to go down that road, I don't think Mr. Trump will, but he may at some point, is the charge legitimate? That's where I was going. Now, we can get into another entire conversation about the practical application of the charge. But what I was trying to focus on is the charge itself.
I would concede the point that at the very least, even national citizens do have a natural right to self-defense. Yeah, we'll go with that. So, I mean,
by the laws of nature and nature's God, they have an unalienable right to self-defense.
Right. I just don't want to lose the imperative that, as we've said all night long, knowledge is preeminent here. Knowledge is
power.
And so if you know the whole story, then what you will come to realize is that in order to more firmly invoke that charge against your elected representatives, I would offer that it is imperative that people claim the proper legal status, that they claim for themselves a constitutional status and law as state citizens, that they reestablish those original states that created that compact and asserted that right in the Second Amendment and in their state constitutions and in their statutes. That would bolster, at the very least, that would bolster their claim.
What I would suggest probably is that there is a better way to do it, and you may be proposing a better way. What I would also say is this, and this is probably a good way to kind of close this conversation with respect to what we've been talking about the 14th Amendment and the Reconstruction Act and the things that have been going on here in Texas and its relevance to the show. And that is to invite people to take some time and investigate this. Go to americasremedy.com and look at the website and listen to some of John and the others' presentations that are done there. There's documents and all kinds of tabs on the website where you can drill down and learn a whole bunch of things. And people need to take some time and study this. I've been for the last few weeks, I've been doing it myself, trying to get a handle on what this is about. And it's got legitimacy in my mind that I think people need to take seriously and decide for themselves whether this makes sense or not. I think it does. I think that what John's presented over the last couple of weeks for us, Riscalla, has been clearly good scholarship. And
at the least,
I think you would agree with that. And so, and by the way, this is a part of the puzzle, in my opinion, in my estimation and analysis of what we've been talking about. It's not the whole puzzle. I think, Milo, you would even concur with some of the things you and I have talked about and we talked about on the show last week. I think that there's another whole framework or concept here with having to do with the power of the sword, the question of what the well-regulated militia is versus what we've been told it is and we think it is. I think that there's practical applications of that. The issue of how we have lost our vested authority, as I mentioned earlier tonight, Riscalla, is absolutely a problem, and we need to figure out how to restore it to the people of this country. And there's a better way to do it, and there's a worse way to do it. There's a way, the old saying, doing a right thing in a wrong way may apply. Mm-hmm. We want to do a right thing in a right way. And so these are the kinds of things that we're trying to engage people to think about and start looking at seriously. And one part of the story that we don't have might be the piece that allows us to fix the problem. And so we want to entertain all these things and really try to understand what the implications are, what the ideas are, and what the consequences are. And then from that, hopefully we can do something before we have gone too far that we can't actually come up with anything that's going to be of any value whatsoever. So that's my suggestions about where we take this stuff. We've thrown out, a lot of things up to this point, and we're not even done with the show. But
all right. Well, hang on.
That's my thought.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. You've been listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. Tonight I have, for a brief period, we had John Ainsworth on Thank you, John, for taking the time. We have Milo and we have David on. Thank you guys for taking the time. And I didn't write down the other gentleman's name. Who did you put on for just a few moments?
Yeah, it was Paul.
Paul.
Paul Tompson. He is the provisional lieutenant governor of the reestablished state of Texas.
Well, thank you, Paul, for taking the time as well. So give us a couple of minutes here. We'll be right back. Don't go away. It's the Red Pill Reality Show. This stuff blows my mind because it's not stuff that we talk about on a regular basis. And it really kind of makes me sad that we know more about sports, which would really literally have no effect on your life whatsoever unless you're betting or something like that. But it's not going to have an effect on your life or your loved ones' lives. But you know so much about that and you know so little. And I'm one of them. I should know much more than I know. I have learned that you can't trust your government. That I have learned. That's a lesson I learned very quickly. And I'm very passionate about making sure people understand. You can't trust them, and one of the reasons you can't trust them is they have purposely dumbed everybody down. And what we're talking about tonight is poison to them. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Being a dad is an adventure full of special moments.
A cruise?
Surprise! Unexpected moments.
I got this.
And even awkward moments.
Okay, Dad, thank you.
But every moment you spend with your kids, even the smallest moments, can make the biggest impact on your child's life. So take a moment to be a dad today.
There's a lot of fear in coming back to school. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but the teachers, the counselors, they help you. One of the teachers was Miss Araceli. Miss Araceli, she gave me direction. Every single time I had a question, she'll put down whatever she's doing and she'll come over and she'll sit there with you until you get it. Thank you, Miss Araceli. I know you make a difference in people's lives because of the person and teacher you are. I wanted to be here because I wanted to thank you for helping me get a beautiful gift. 50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work. Getting your high school diploma, it is a life-changing experience. It really is.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Have you ever heard of Audible? Audible is a website with hundreds of thousands of audiobooks. They're all high quality, easy to listen to, and, best of all, if you take advantage of a special deal that we've worked out for you, you can get one for free. That's right, a free audiobook of your choice in any genre, simply by going to audibletrial.com/openeyes and signing up for the free trial. It's simple to do, and it would support the shows that we bring to you, and hey, you get a free book out of the whole thing. So why not take advantage of it today? Go to audibletrial.com/openeyes and sign up for the trial.
Ask 10 different scientists about the environment, population control, genetics, and you'll get 10 different answers. But there's one thing every scientist on the planet agrees on. Whether it happens in 100 years, or 1,000 years, or 1,000,000 years, eventually our sun will grow cold and go out. When that happens, it won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe, and Lao Tzu, and Einstein, and Morobuto, and Buddy Holly, and Aristophanes. All of this was for nothing. Unless we go to the stars.
Do you need toner for your Epson, Hewlett-Packard, Canon, Brother, Apple, or Sharp printers? Look no further than Laser Technologies. In business for over 20 years, they offer the lowest prices on toner on the web. They can also repair your laser printers and toners fast and easy. Call their expert staff today at 561-792-9600 or email us at service@laser-technologies.com for all your toner needs. All toner is shipped nationwide. Why wait? Get the lowest prices on toner. Call or email us today.
While other stations just talk a good game, we win it.
Hey, sounds like somebody's having a lot of fun.
pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Goes, 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 goes,
Now, from sunny South Florida, it's the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscalla. Every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to midnight on the L&M Network. And now, your host, Riscalla.
Okay, we are back. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. I am your host, Riscalla. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. And a big thank you to the L&M Radio Network for allowing us the platform to be able to share with you this information. Vital information. Vital information. Those of us who are just kind of fed up with what's going on and frustrated because there seemingly is no way to go about regaining the things that have been stolen from us. And then I find people like David and Milo and John and Paul who are not only disseminating the information, but living it. In some of these cases, actually living what they're talking about, which is a way for us to return to a country where our God-given rights haven't been stolen from us like they have in the past. So anyway, I have David tonight and Milo here in the conversation with me. Before I get them back on, I want to ask those of you who have taken the time to listen, to please tell your friends about L&M, www.latenightinthemidlands.com. Tell them to go on over there, take a look around. We have a chat room. We don't charge for the chat room. We are a listener-supported station, so we're asking for people to subscribe to the station, and it's a whole whopping $5, you guys. $5. We try to let people know this isn't about money, but it is about money, unfortunately, because of the systems that we are involved in. It takes money to pay for the internet. It takes money to pay for the lines that people call in on. It's different bills that we run across. And it's not about trying to get rich at $5. You know, you could give up one of those things you call a meal at a McDonald's or one of those places, which isn't food in my word. Anyway, but that's a whole nother. But $5 for a whole month, you know. Or if you don't feel like being a subscriber, make a donation. It goes for a good cause. And tonight you're seeing part of that cause. You're hearing part of that cause, I should say. And the information that we share with you tonight, this isn't something that you're going to find readily just anywhere. But not only that, because there's a lot of people that share information, but they actually haven't lived the information. Tonight we had Paul on with us, who is this information that we're talking about, living that information. So we know that this is real. We know that this has credibility. We know that it's being done. And if it's being done, then it can be replicated. And that's what we're out to do, to give the information out there so that people can take control. We're the ones who are supposed to have control. And unless you've been living under a rock, you would agree with me that we have lost control. We have people who are supposed to be representing us who do not represent us. They certainly don't represent our best benefits, our best interests. And that's pretty evident today. So you don't have to be frustrated. You don't have to give up. What you have to do is learn a little bit. And I think the website is America's Remedy. David, correct me if I'm right. Is it americasremedy.com?
Yes.
Okay. So you go to americasremedy.com, take a look around. I'm not affiliated with these people financially. I'm affiliated with these people through a bond of unity, that we want what is best for our children, our grandchildren, for the rest of society. We have been taken down a road of deception, and through that we have lost so much that people think it's normal today. It's not normal. If you are somebody who has never, what's a good analogy? If you've never witnessed like an act of nature, a beautiful act of nature, you didn't even know that existed, and then somebody comes along and shows it to you and said, this has been going on forever and ever, and you go, oh my gosh, how could that have happened without me knowing about it? Because there's a system in place that has conditioned people along a certain pattern of lines to feel that all of this is normal, all of this is natural. Can you imagine that we have teenagers, we have 17, 18-year-olds, possibly even 19-year-olds at this point, that their whole lives our country has been at war. So it's normal for them. There's nothing normal about war, my friends. Nothing at all. There's nothing pretty about war. There's nothing manly about war. The only thing that war does is bring more strife and more dredge upon people and hurt more people on this planet than anything else, and nothing gets solved. And the evidence of that is, look at how long we've been where we were. We were supposed to go into Iraq. We were supposed to free the people. We haven't freed those people, those poor people. We have created a hell for them. We're still in Afghanistan. Why? Osama bin Laden, we have been told, I don't know how many times, he's dead. He's dead and buried. So why are we still there? Because of the resources there. Again, because of the resources in Iraq. Again, because of the resources in Libya. The resources in Syria. This is why they wanted to go into Syria. The resources in Iran. We don't have a government, in my book, in my opinion, I hope that the rest of you agree with me, that is behaving in a manner that is what I want for our country. They're behaving in a manner that is what is best for a small group of people, and it's been like that for a long time. And as long as you have a small group of people telling a large group of people what to do, it's never going to go well. It's never, because you don't have the intent of the larger group of people in mind. It's always about the smaller group of people. The smaller group always benefits. And we end up with the burden of paying those benefits, whether it's financial, emotional, spiritual, whatever that might be. We're the ones who are paying the bill. We are the ones where they get their power from. Yet we are the ones who, in the end of it all, are the abused ones. Look at what they're doing with people who don't belong here legally. They're here illegally. They are illegal immigrants that are here. They treat them better than they treat people who have been paying into the system for all their lives. In some cases, they pay them 2 and 3 times what people who are retired and on the system. There's nothing okay with that. There's nothing acceptable with that, but people have been conditioned in such a manner to think that, oh, well, that's the government. They have the authority to do that. They don't have the authority to do that. They have the power. I like David brings up a good point. Power and authority. They have the power to do it. They got the guns. That's why they want to take ours away. Because if it was balanced like it was in the old days, you wouldn't see the behaviors that you're seeing today. They would know that their lives are on the line. We're not going to put up with your nonsense. You betray us, then you will pay the ultimate price. But today they betray us. They just get a raise. All right. Let me let Milo and David back in. Go ahead, Milo.
I actually would like to offer a little bit of a different perspective. When you say that the wars and the behavior of governments in a tyrannical manner, which really is what this all amounts to in a word, when you say that that's not normal, I actually would have to disagree with you. In my opinion, look at history as a whole, human history in general, it's all too normal. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it just. But it's definitely, it is, unfortunately,
it is the pattern.
That is what really set originally the American experiment, in my opinion, set it apart and made it exceptional and unique and wonderful in human history, was because it was a break from what was normal. even though it had its imperfections and its flaws, and we would all readily admit that it was not a perfect system by any means. It was, as I've used the analogy most of my adult life, I said that America got started with it. It started the race with its shoestrings tied together, and not to get off topic, but that's usually in reference to the fact that we had the institution of slavery. That was like trying to run a race with your shoes tied together, in my opinion. That was our real big stumbling block. And it cost us dearly. And it was not necessarily that it was the cause of the war. There's definitely a big issue, and I do believe it cost us. But I want to get back to the point is that, America had ideals. It had put something out there for the rest of the world and for us to look at and live up to. And if we had continued on a path of trying to perpetually strive toward reaching and realizing those ideals, that would have been a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, somewhere about 1860, about 1860, and then even more so 7 years later, we really just got totally off track because there were certain elements in government that took the opportunity of that shoestrings tied together, that stumbling block. They took that opportunity to completely overthrow the system that had been put in place by the Constitution. And in overthrowing that and replacing it with the national system that they did then, they really cut the experiment short. And what we really want to try to do today is to get back to a point where we can put that experiment back into effect, put it back into action, and hopefully give it a chance again for hopefully more than the 90 years it existed at first, just a few generations. Hopefully this one will have an opportunity to play out over many, many generations. We want those ideals to have a chance to flourish so that America can actually be a beacon to the rest of the world, so that it can be great again. And not that I'm a big Trump fan, but I mean, he uses that rhetorically, and I feel like what would really make it great is to get back on a constitutional foundation.
Amen. I agree with that.
Let me take you from there to another thought. And Milo, I really do appreciate what you just said. It's funny because I was thinking along similar lines as you began to speak. Because Riscalla, I remember at the beginning of the show, you brought up your concern about what you see might be coming after the next election.
Yeah.
And that there's a real grave warning that we have, that we've got to figure out how to mitigate what may be coming. And I would like to say that I actually have some hope here because of what Milo was referring to and what we have the ability to do because of the fact that we have a constitutional remedy. We just have to figure out what we have in our hands and figure out how we can get to where we can utilize it as expeditiously as possible. The thought that I had was, we have some components of remedy that are something that can give us hope, and we can win in the end if we're willing to just recognize what we have in our hands and start moving in that direction. To bring it full circle in this conversation tonight, where do we go with this? What do we do to bring things to a better situation than we've had in the past? And how do we go about doing something like that? And I think that it's important for us to wrap our minds around some of these principles that are even in our Declaration of Independence. I don't think anybody would doubt at the moment that we are suffering in this country today, that there's things that we don't think are right. But the problem is, or the reality is, we're more prone to suffer while evils are sufferable than to alter the forms to which we're accustomed. We're willing to take a bad situation. We're willing to have what's going on in our society today and just go, okay, well, it's the way it is, we'll figure it out. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce us under an absolute despotism. Anybody feeling that right now? It is our right, it is our duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for our future security. However, we also have the opportunity that when things are bad, that we can alter or we can abolish our government. We don't have to always go to the latter. We can go to the former. We can simply correct things that might not be working the way they ought to. And what I see with what John is suggesting, and Milo, by being part of what they are doing, is perhaps an alteration. And the thing that's really cool about it is, it's not really an alteration at all. It's correcting something that was done inappropriately and unconstitutionally in the past. We're not having to do anything except fix something that's broken. And then in addition, we can go back and look what the founding generation did. The founding generation had a wherewithal that we barely understand. But when you go back and you remember the good past, what they did, and we can repeat that good past, we can be blessed if we do that. And if we decide we're not going to look at that in the past, we're going to get what's coming to us. So I would suggest that we might want to go back and look at it and see what they did and how they had the wherewithal to correct a major problem in their day that's very similar to the one we're having today. If we can even understand what they did, and we don't do it exactly the same way they did it, but we get some components of it, and we begin to reapply them, such as, what's this well-regulated militia, and how is it properly applied, and how is it removed from us? How can we put it back in such a way that we regain our authority and we regain our system of government that allows us to be the ones who are the governor of our society, where we give consent to a just government, because it says that just governments derive their just powers by the consent of the governed. And so these are some of the things that I'm hoping we'll take away here as we finish up, because we want to bring this full circle from your concern at the beginning to how we might actually get to another step toward a remedy that's actually going to allow us to avoid what you're concerned about coming in a year.
And I got to tell you, I don't think I'm the only one who's concerned about it. I think there's a lot of people who are very concerned, and we are being backed into a corner. When I say we, those of us who are basically in line with what is happening today in this presidency, we're being backed into a corner. And majority of, I'm not speaking for them, I'm speaking for myself, the way that I see it. The majority of us have just taken it on the cheek, if you will. But we're getting to the point we're not going to take it anymore. And regardless of who wins, in my mind, there's no way that President Trump is going to lose. But there were people who felt that way about Hillary. So we know that there are things that they are doing to try to steal this election. So if President Trump wins, there's going to be people who are going to go absolutely berserk. If President Trump loses, I think even more people are going to be going absolutely berserk. So if we're not able to somehow circumvent or release this pressure somehow prior to all of this coming down, I am concerned. I'm very concerned, because we've been pushed into a corner.
That is a perfect phrase for it, too, and that is not the first time that we have referred to. There's a gentleman that works with us with America's Remedy. He was involved even before I was, Riscalla. His name is Cliff Muncie. And, I mean, he's done so much for us. He's our director of media, actually, with the help of his wife. And both of them have been a blessing to our effort for years. I mean, they've been involved for about 10 years, I believe. And he has, among the many things he's done, one of the things that he has done was to offer that, a turn of phrase is that what we advocate is a pressure release valve, federalism in general, as opposed to the nationalism that we live under today. The reinstituting of the federal structure of government is a pressure release valve. And you are exactly right to refer to it in that way, in my opinion, because it does. State sovereignty gives, and when it's, that's what we're ultimately all about, is returning the sovereignty of the state. And that would give people the opportunity through that subsidiarity that David has spoken about, that would give people the opportunity to not feel the pressure anymore of having to be confined and subjugated and forced into accepting the one-size-fits-all solutions that come down from the national government, from the Supreme Court, under the guise and auspices of the 14th Amendment. It would be a pressure release valve. It would release so much of this anxiety and angst and the friction that we see. I mean, like Charlottesville, you look at what happened there, and I mean, that was just a symptom of the problem. And when we address the ultimate underlying problem that causes those kind of symptoms to crop up, and I believe if we don't address it, it'll only get worse.
I agree.
But if we were to address that problem, then I think those symptoms would all dissipate, and we would all find that it is literally liberating in every sense of the word to be able to live our lives by home rule, to be able to live our lives as we in our local communities see best fit to do.
See, that's the way I believe that's the way it was intended to be. As David has pointed out several occasions, at the local level, we take care of it at the local level, and I think everything else falls into place. Once you can take care of the pennies, the dollars fall into play. We take care of it at the local level, and we grow it from the local level out. If every community was as involved and as educated as you guys are, it would be difficult at best. It would be difficult for any of them to pull the nonsense that they get away with now. And the result would be, we would be the ones governing ourselves. We would be the ones who are supposed to be represented. Nobody holds these people's feet to the fire anymore. And I think that's part of the responsibility that we have, where we have failed as citizens. We've just accepted it. Again, I go back to the frustration. We've just, that's just the way it is. What can you do? Well, those of you who have been listening, this is what you can do. Go to americasremedy.com, get some information, and act. I wanted to ask you before I forget, Milo, do I understand you were involved in Carolina? Or are you involved in Texas? Which one are you involved in?
I am a North Carolina state citizen. I've been a state citizen since 2013, and so I'm involved with the North Carolina American Republic, which is just the temporary name for the original state of North Carolina. When they reestablished, they just gave it a temporary name to distinguish it from the de facto state of North Carolina. And I'm also involved with America's Remedy.
How many people did it take for you to succeed in getting this done?
Well, that's a good question. Nobody really has a definitive answer for how many people it would take to succeed. Obviously, the more the better, and we strive constantly.
Milo, he asked how many did it take to do what you did?
Yeah.
I see. Did it take?
Yeah.
I was not involved in 1997, December 97, when they reestablished the state. So I'm not really sure how many people were involved, but it was somewhere on the order of around 15. And that's about 15. The number that they've got in Texas right now as well, just in this point.
15, as in 10 plus 5, 15.
Yes, sir. All it takes is a small group of people. You're laughing. All it takes is a small group of people, enough to constitute some of the more essential offices of the state under the original Constitution, and they come together and they pick up that original Constitution and they swear their oath of loyalty and allegiance to that Constitution as a form of government, and the body of people together who have given that oath to that Constitution. And so, no, it does not require, 300 or 3,000 people off the bat.
15 people, and here we are in Florida with 71% of the people voted for the legalization of cannabis, and they jerked us around for 2 years. They told us.
I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I was involved with the 10th Amendment Center, and they, you know what they do. I'm sure you're well familiar with their, So their whole shtick is state sovereignty as well, and I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about them, but in 2013, I just got to say this. In 2013, when I became a state citizen, I had been a county coordinator for the 10th Amendment Center. At the time, I was in constant communication with the people who were at the very top of that organization. And when I brought this subject up to them, because of the things that I had learned through John and his organization and all of that, I brought this entire subject up to them. I said, how can you guys be interested in reasserting state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment when we don't have sovereign states? And what wound up happening was that, and I honestly, I understand why, but I don't agree with it. I left them because and I'm not going to name names, but what the leader of that organization said to me literally was, we're just simply not going to have anything to do with that legal position, with that assertion of whatever it is that you're asserting. We just don't want to. I said, well, if you keep refusing this, if you don't want to look the problem in the face, that there are no people of the state, so therefore there are no sovereign states, then you're never going to have a legitimate argument for asserting the 10th Amendment and asserting state sovereignty. And in the time that has ensued since then, not only have the body of people in several states voted overwhelmingly for state sovereignty initiatives. You mentioned Florida and cannabis. I can give you an example of North Carolina and it was called at the time Amendment 1. It was opposed to acknowledging gay marriage. And regardless of what your position is on that, I mean, all that I'm saying is it was something that received the vast majority of support in the state. And I can also point to a gentleman here from Oklahoma has brought to my attention that in Kansas there was a state sovereignty initiative that pertained to the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. It was it dealt with the interstate commerce clause and how if a gun were manufactured in a state and sold within that state and never left that state, then it should never be governed. It should never be
remember
affected.
something like this, yeah. Yeah, I do remember something like that, yeah. Wow.
The ownership should never be affected by federal statutes.
Yeah.
And what wound up happening was an accessory to a gun, a silencer actually. He points to a case wherein a gentleman in Kansas was actually prosecuted by the federal government for purchasing a silencer from another Kansan who had manufactured that silencer himself. And it never left the state, but the federal government prosecuted it. And what the 10th Amendment has backed off to the point of doing is saying we want to push legislation that is not nullification. It's not interposition. It's not what Thomas Jefferson and James Madison advocated for in the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions of 1798. What the 10th Amendment Center now has resigned itself to doing is simply encouraging states to pass legislation that says the state will not aid and abet in the federal enforcement of federal statutes, even if they are unconstitutional. That's weak. At the very least, that is weak.
Yeah.
To me, it's a sellout. And the
I agree.
reason they've backed off to that, the reason that they've had to back up to that position is precisely because they've run up against the wall that there really are no sovereign states.
Wow. All right. Well, we are. So I could go on and on. We're out of time, unfortunately. We're going to do a follow-up, David. If you have time, we'll do a follow-up next week. Again, I think this is absolutely vital. But I want to thank you. I want to thank Paul, Milo, John, David, all of you for taking the time to share with us tonight. Vital information literally can change our lives, literally. Those of you who have been frustrated about what's going on in our country and you want some way of trying to get back, this is a way for us to get back. This is a way for us legally, on legal ground, to be able to get back our country. So we'll be back in a week. We'll follow up in a week with more information. Archives are set up. You go to Red Pill Reality Show on Facebook. You can find the archives there. Again, Paul, Milo, John, David, thank you. God bless. Talk to you soon.
You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Take care.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.